Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Nashville, Tennessee saw a devastating event in March 2020 that had an impact well beyond its boundaries. In addition to upsetting the local community, Holly Williams and William Lanway's tragic deaths sparked a national dialogue on the widespread problems of mental health disorders, domestic violence, and the destructive effects of turbulent relationships. The horrific circumstances surrounding their deaths, the investigation that followed, and the story's wider ramifications for domestic violence awareness will all be covered in this film. More than just a narrative of loss, this one is a potent warning that emphasizes how crucial it is to spot the warning signs of abusive relationships and how urgent it is to get help. Come along with us as we work through the intricacies of their lives and the lessons this tragedy has to offer. 31-year-old Holly Williams was well known for her vivacious demeanor, contagious laugh, and compassionate disposition. She was characterized as a cherished friend, sister, and daughter who made everyone around her happy. Holly's life was full of possibilities, and she had goals and dreams. Beneath her cheerful facade, though, Holly battled relationship issues, especially with her ex-boyfriend William Lanway. Holly, who grew up in Nashville, has strong ties to the area. She was supported through thick and thin by her close-knit family. Friends remembered Holly's love of adventure and her enthusiasm for life. She loved being outside, traveling, and savoring time spent with those she cared about. Sadly, her connection with William would turn out to be a major obstacle, overshadowing her lively personality. Born in 1988, William Lanway had a tumultuous history filled with unpredictable and violent conduct. A few years before to their untimely deaths, he and Holly started dating. At first, their relationship appeared to be normal, full of the promise and excitement that come with youthful love. But as time passed, their relationship's dynamics started to change. Holly's family and friends observed that William had a history of jealousy and was possessive. There were several breakups and reconciliations as a result of their unstable relationship. Holly tried to put some distance between herself and William, but he found it difficult to accept their breakup, which resulted in increasingly troubling conduct. In their relationship, Holly's loved ones observed indications of emotional abuse. William repeatedly displayed domineering behavior by keeping tabs on Holly's social connections and demanding to know where she was. There were rumors that William was verbally insulting Holly, which made her feel even more alone and afraid. Holly frequently confided in her friends about her difficulties and her worries about William's instability and fury. Understanding the terrible conclusion of their story requires knowledge of the history of domestic abuse in their relationship. The pair had previously been the subject of multiple domestic disturbance calls handled by law enforcement. Holly claimed to have felt intimidated and worried about her safety in these situations. One significant instance occurred in early 2020 when Holly went to the police after William had followed her around and showed up at her house without permission. In violation of her attempts to establish space, he even made repeated attempts to get in touch with her via social media and phone conversations. As William's actions worsened, Holly's worries grew, and she started to worry more about her safety. Holly tried to put herself out of the situation, but she was entangled in a web of intimidation and emotional manipulation. Friends saw that Holly frequently felt bad about leaving William because she was afraid of his reaction and possible injury. She frequently battled the dread of reprisals, which is a typical occurrence for many people in violent relationships. Holly's circumstances become more vulnerable in the days preceding the disaster. Holly was reported missing on March 1, 2020, when she did not come home from a night out with friends. When they were unable to get in touch with her, frightened relatives became concerned for her safety and called the police. The police soon discovered Holly's turbulent connection with William when they started their inquiry. Red flags were raised right away when friends and relatives shared information about Holly's anxieties and previous encounters with William. Given William's violent and domineering past, the authorities were aware of the possible threat Holly posed. Police were notified by a 911 call about a disturbance at a nearby hotel on March 3. According to witnesses, William and Holly got into a furious dispute. Even though the police were called to the location, both people had already departed by the time they got there. This interaction brought to light the growing strain in their relationship. Holly's acquaintances reported that she had been missing for a few days on March 4, 2020. Concern for her safety increased as alarm bells began to ring. In the past, Holly had shared her worries about William with her friends, which made them think that something horrible might have occurred. When a construction worker found an abandoned automobile at a Nashville construction site on March 5, 2020, the inquiry took a disastrous turn. The bodies of Holly Williams and William Lanway were found in the car, which was later determined to be Holly's. It was a somber and startling scene. It was soon established by the authorities that William had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and Holly had been shot several times. The neighborhood was rocked by this finding, which prompted an investigation into what happened before this awful conclusion. It became evident during the course of the investigation that William had killed Holly before killing himself. The terrible effects of a dysfunctional relationship marked by violence and control were brought to light by this sad murder-suicide. Eric, a married man who had been linked with Holly through her escort service under the nickname Lila Love, was a major driving force behind the convoluted web of deceit, treachery, and violence that started the inquiry into the killings of Holly Williams and Bill Lanway. When Holly's boyfriend Bill broke into her escort account and discovered private information about her clients, Eric's life took a terrible turn. Knowing that disclosing his contact with an escort could ruin his marriage and standing in the community, Bill exploited this information to blackmail Eric. Instead of submitting to Bill's demands, Eric turned to Gil, his private security guard, for assistance. Thinking Lila Love was a fictitious name, he first assigned Gil the duty of determining Holly's real identity. But under the pretense of looking into a missing woman, Gil recruited Brian Brockway and his brother Chad, who worked in security as well. Thinking he was assisting someone in need, Chad researched Holly in great detail. As the inquiry went on, it became evident that Eric's problems were not being caused by Holly. He was being extorted for money by Bill. Another security contractor, Adam Carey, finally faced Holly head-on after recognizing the complex dynamics at work. Adam chose to convey messages to Holly and Bill after unraveling the network of blackmail, and on March 11, 2020, he followed Bill to a grocery shop. Eric made a crucial choice that evening after Bill called him, likely to demand more money. Eric gave Adam and Brian permission to murder Holly and Bill if needed. The murders occurred on March 12 in Nashville, where Brian and Adam flew to shortly after. They were seen departing together at around 11:40 p.m. on security footage taken from Holly's residence. Gunshots were heard shortly after departing, and persistent yelling suggested a parking lot ambush. According to the video, Holly was unintentionally shot during the commotion, and Bill was singled out for his blackmailing actions. When Brian and Adam realized Holly was still alive, they shot her once more to be sure she wouldn't live. The killers dumped Holly's car in a landfill after the killings, then drove to Memphis, where Adam dropped Brian off at the airport before heading back to North Carolina. As if the murder for hire were a routine service, Eric inexplicably left a positive evaluation for Gil's security company, Speartip. The FBI looked into Eric's finances more after this internet review raised suspicions, and found that he had paid the murderers almost $1 million, 0 cents. Detectives spent 2 years trying to make sense of a lot of dead ends in the case, since Eric could easily argue that he had hired the security team to look into Holly and Bill's identity rather than to kill them. They were looking for concrete proof that would connect him to the killings. Chad Brockway, who had first helped collect information on Holly without realizing the scope of the investigation, was the person the police chose to speak with. Chad went undercover to get further information after discovering the truth and consented to assist the authorities. When Chad reached out to Adam in his undercover capacity, he was startlingly candid about his readiness to carry out murder for pay. After the conversation verified that Adam was aware of the murder-for-hire procedure, Chad and Brian met at a restaurant while Chad was wearing a wire. After being quiet at first, Brian later boasted about the killings, claiming that he had overpowered Bill and that Adam was eager to kill Holly. This startling discovery exposed the murderers' lack of regret and created a troubling portrait of them. To stop Brian, Adam, and Gil from escaping, the authorities planned their simultaneous arrests on December 10, 2021, but they held off on arresting Eric right away because they wanted hard proof that he planned the killings. Investigators offered Gil a proposal after the 3 guys were taken into custody. He could lessen his own charges if he assisted them. In order to get Eric to disclose his objectives, they came up with a scheme for Gil to phone him and pretend to ask for more money. In passing, Eric stated that he would prefer to completely remove Adam and Brian's threat rather than just pay them off. He gave the police the crucial piece of evidence they needed to charge him when he said, They had to be sure they wouldn't be back in 6 months. Shortly after, on his way back from a hunting trip, Eric was arrested. Gil entered guilty pleas to murder for hire, abduction conspiracy, and kidnapping resulting in death. By December 2022, he fulfilled his promise to testify against the other 3 while awaiting punishment. In November 2023, Eric, Adam, and Brian's trial was held in a tumultuous courtroom, with each defendant having their own attorney. According to their argument, Gil deceived Eric into hiring them, and the killings were accidental rather than the result of planned acts of violence. Gil's thorough evidence, however, refuted their assertions and emphasized that the first goal was only to frighten Bill and Holly. After deliberating for 2 weeks and 7 hours, the jury found Adam and Brian guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping that results in death, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Eric was convicted of both conspiracy to conduct kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Hearings are scheduled for 2024, and each could receive a life sentence. Following this tragedy, the people of Nashville came together to support Holly's friends and family. To commemorate Holly's legacy, vigils were conducted during which family members told tales of her generosity, tenacity, and influence on their lives. The community's dedication to increasing awareness about domestic violence was demonstrated by the overwhelming support. By sharing her experience on social media, Holly's family pushed for increased understanding and assistance for victims of domestic abuse. They underlined how important it is for people in comparable circumstances to realize they are not alone and to get help. Discussions concerning the need for better support networks for victims of domestic abuse were sparked by the terrible circumstances surrounding Holly's death. This case was also used by advocacy groups to support training programs that increase public understanding of the warning indicators of domestic violence. To raise awareness of the value of identifying unhealthy relationships and offering assistance to those in need, they planned seminars and events throughout Nashville. Nashville's city government also took action against domestic abuse after Holly's death. They started efforts to give victims access to resources including hotlines, counseling, and legal support. The response from the community showed a dedication to stopping similar tragedies in the future and helping victims of domestic abuse. That concludes our in-depth analysis of Holly Williams and William Lanway's unfortunate story for today. We hope that this inquiry clarifies the intricacies and ramifications of the decisions taken. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Blessy Gonenko, a 56-year-old woman, finished her workday on Saturday, May 24, 2014, and was on her way home. She lived in North Shore, Auckland, New Zealand, with her husband of 30 years, Antonio Goding. Their relationship can be traced back to their childhood in Cebu City, Philippines, where they both attended the same school. They dated, married, and raised 3 children, B, Vincent, and John. In 2004, the family of 5 moved to New Zealand. Blessy grew to love Auckland because it allowed her to indulge in her favorite activities, such as exploration, walking, and discovering new places. She worked at a job she enjoyed and had formed strong bonds with local friends. The Godinko family embraced life in Auckland, as evidenced by their shared experiences and joys. Just a few days before May 20, Blessy spent her birthday with her children, having lunch at a pub in Green Hive and a family dinner at Urban Turbine in Wynyard Quarter. Unfortunately, Antonio was unable to join them because he was on a work trip abroad. Returning on June 15, Blessy could not wait to see him again. They were a close-knit family who were happiest when they were together. On May 24th, Blessy Godinko completed her work at Tower Insurance at 7 p.m. Despite her regular working hours until 5 p.m., she willingly took on a few extra hours of overtime without prearranged transportation because her coworker, Bahula Shah, who usually gave her a ride, had left earlier. Blessy chose to take the Birkenhead Transport 973 bus from Lower Albert Street to Birkdale Road. The bus stop was about 700 meters from her house, and the short walk should have taken her only 5 minutes. However, Blessing was unable to arrive at her destination that evening. Blessie's daughter noticed her absence when she returned home from work at 3:15 a.m. The following day, concerned B contacted her two brothers to inquire about their mother's whereabouts, but both were unaware. At 6 a.m., I used my iPhone app to find Blessie's phone on a grass verge in Salisbury Road, just 100 yards from their house. Blessie's shoes and the Tupperware container she used for her daily lunch at work were also found near the verge. When the police arrived, they initially suspected a hit and run. The scattered nature of Blessing's belongings on the verge raised the possibility that she had been struck by a vehicle and was now disoriented and lost. However, it became clear that something more sinister had occurred. A young girl living on the same street reported hearing the woman's scream at the time. Blessie alighted from the bus closest to her home. Witnesses saw a BMW overtake the bus carrying Blessie, prompting police to investigate 28-year-old Tony Douglas Robertson. When questioned, Robertson claimed ignorance of Blessie and the events surrounding her disappearance. Notably, the police were already familiar with Robertson, who had previously been convicted of sex offenses and abductions. He had been released from prison 5 months prior and was subject to an extended supervision order that included 24-hour GPS tracking. Robertson's movements were tracked using the ankle bracelet GPS tracking device, which revealed his presence on the street where Blessings vanished around the same time. Investigations also revealed that he spent time on May 24th at Eskdale Cemetery before returning the next day. This prompted the police to conduct a search of the cemetery, where Blessie's body was discovered 2 days later with the help of a police dog. Her remains were hidden under pine scrub surrounded by foliage and debris and wrapped in a sheet. Tragically, Blessie had been raped and fatally stabbed. Following the discovery, police arrested Tony Robertson and charged him with rape and murder. Despite the evidence, he pleaded not guilty. The prosecution claimed that Tony, a stranger to Blessie, saw her walking home as he drove down Birkdale Street. According to their case, he intentionally struck her with his vehicle, causing her leg to break into pieces. Tony allegedly picked up Blessie, put her in the back of his car, and drove to his Birkdale apartment shortly before 8 p.m. to avoid setting off any alarms, impose a curfew. The witness testimony is intended to support this narrative. One witness stated that they saw Blessie alight from the bus at Brookdale and walk away quickly. They also saw a white sedan-like vehicle overtake the bus and speed down Salesbar Road. The court heard from an 11-year-old girl who lived on Salisbury Road. She stated that, on the night of May 24, while cooking dumplings with her sister, she heard the sound of a car and a high-pitched scream around 7:30 p.m. Her testimony described how she was driving up the hill from Eskdale when it came to a stop. Then I heard a high-pitched scream from a lady, followed by silence. The girl went on to say that the car then drove off towards Brookdale Road. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution claimed that when Tony returned to his apartment, he parked his car in the garage beneath it and proceeded to commit heinous acts against Blessie. According to their case, Tony raped Blessie, strangled her, and brutally stabbed her in a frenzied and violent manner before striking her in the throat. The prosecution also claimed that early the next morning, Tony wrapped Blessie's lifeless body in a bedsheet, placed it back in his car, and drove to Eskdale Cemetery to bury her. They speculated that the timing was deliberate, allowing Tony to avoid violating his curfew. A forensic scientist testified that luminol testing conducted in the area where Blessie's body was discovered revealed a bloody path, indicating that a blood-stained object was most likely dragged through the grass. The evidence suggested that Blessie's body had been transported through different parts of the cemetery before being placed on the ground and dragged to the spot where it was discovered. Dr. Carl Y. Grin, a pathologist, presented details about the injuries in court. He testified that Blessie had multiple deep stab wounds, one of which was so violent that it embedded links from her necklace. Dr. A. Grin also stated that when Blessie was stabbed in the throat, her windpipe was damaged. He emphasized that all of Blessie's injuries occurred while she was alive, as evidenced by the blood in her lungs. Pathologist Dr. Carl Walgren testified that Blessie suffered numerous injuries, making it difficult to pinpoint a single cause of death. He suggested that her death was caused by a combination of factors, including strangling, blunt force trauma from being hit by a car, stab wounds, and incised wounds. Dr. Walgren expressed difficulty attributing death to a single injury, but believed that the stabbing hastened her death. Blessie was found to have suffered a variety of blunt force trauma injuries, including broken ribs, legs, teeth, and abrasions consistent with postmortem dragging. Dr. Walgren proposed that Blessy was strangled first to subdue her, followed by stabbings and incise wounds. Evidence of manual strangulation was found, including bruising on her neck, a fractured thyroid, and broken capillaries in her eyes. According to Dr. Y, a grin Blessing could have survived being hit by a car with prompt medical attention. However, she sustained additional injuries, including sharp force injuries that resulted in significant bleeding. When asked about defensive wounds, Dr. Wagner stated that there did not appear to be any explanation to the jury that such an absence is not uncommon in cases where the victim succumbs to violence. Dr. Walgren also informed the court that DNA tests on Blessy's body revealed the presence of Tony's seminal fluid. This testimony provided critical forensic evidence for the prosecution's case. The court was informed that Tony, who was wearing a GPS anklet at the time, had visited Eskdale Cemetery hours before the murder. The prosecution claimed that Tony was scouting for a location to hide a body, which indicated premeditation. They claimed that he planned the murder in advance, choosing the burial site before deciding on his victim. The DP's data also revealed Tony returning to the cemetery early the following morning, leading the prosecution to believe he dumped Blessy's body at that time. Crown Prosecutor Michael Walker emphasized the significance of these visits, claiming that they demonstrated the defendant's intent to kill someone and that the trip to the cemetery was to determine where to dispose of the body. The court heard that blood was found in Tony's car, and a knife and some of Blessy's belongings were discovered buried in the back of his property. The knife contained traces of Blessy's blood. Tony's BMW was damaged, and evidence of this was presented in court. Detective Constable Shane Page testified that the vehicle had recently sustained damage. The majority of the rear passenger seatbelt was missing. When I dismantled the seatbelt as the anchorage point, I discovered that about a meter, or 940 mm, was missing. It'd been cut. The detective also testified about additional damage inside Tony's car, such as cuts and scratches on the leather seats in the back. He discovered a significant amount of replaced foam in the back seat, as well as blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk. The auto glazier told the court that, on May 26, he was summoned to Tony's home to repair a broken BMW windshield. He found it strange that the windscreen had already been removed from the car, and he discovered blood inside. When asked about the cause of the damage, Tony claimed it occurred while he was joking with friends. According to Tony, a friend slipped on the bonnet and crashed through the window. A sergeant from the serious crash unit testified that he thought Blessy was intentionally struck. He speculated that she was struck while walking on the pavement, citing the discovery of a tire imprint on the verge near where her belongings were discovered. In the defense's case, Tony admitted to causing Blessy's death, but claimed it was unintentional and not planned. According to his defense, Tony claimed that he panicked after accidentally hitting Blessy and then inflicted the injuries on her body to make the incident appear random. He claimed that all injuries were inflicted post-mortem. During the trial, Tony fired his legal team and decided to defend himself. Tony told the court that he denied the prosecution's version of events and stated that he panicked following the accidental collision. He claimed that putting Blessy in his car and driving home was only to comply with his curfew. "I put a strain on my car to meet my curfew of 8 p.m. and remained there until 6 a.m. Tony contended that the prosecution was incorrect and claimed premeditation, citing the lack of witnesses to the car accident. He explained his presence at the cemetery on May 24 and 25 by claiming he was attempting to purchase illegal substances. Tony argued that the DNA evidence was microscopic, making it difficult for scientists to isolate and test. The defense presented opposing views on Blessy's injuries from another pathologist, Dr. Chapman, who disagreed with Dr. Wagner's findings. Dr. Chapman's report read in court suggested that Blessy's neck injuries, particularly the fractured thyroid, could have been caused by another blow to the area. The report stated that the bruising on Blessy's neck did not appear to be caused by her fingertips. Dr. Chapman's differing views, particularly on the likelihood of Blessy inhaling her own blood, supported Tony's claim that he caused the stab wounds post-mortem to simulate a random attack. During his testimony, Tony stated that when he placed Blessy in his car, he assumed she was already dead. He claimed that he staged the scene to appear like a random attack because he was under the influence of methamphetamine at the time. Tony also denied the rape allegations, claiming that the DNA evidence found on Blessy's body, specifically his seminal fluid, was contaminated and caused by police malpractice. However, the jury rejected Tony's version of events and found him guilty of rape and murder. Tony was sentenced to life in prison, with a 24-year minimum non-parole period and preventive detention for the rape. In New Zealand, preventive detention is an open-ended jail term that can be extended indefinitely or recalled at any time. Tony appealed the verdict, claiming that Blessie's death was an accident and that the jury should have been given the option of convicting him of manslaughter. The appeal was denied, and a subsequent Supreme Court attempt was also unsuccessful, as it was determined that Tony had not presented any evidence during the trial to suggest that a charge of manslaughter could be considered. He was denied further leave to appeal Tony's criminal history, which was revealed after his sentencing, providing a stark context for his actions. Tony was granted name suppression during the trial, which concealed his previous convictions for child sexual offenses. The details of his criminal history were kept from the jury. In 2005, when Tony was only 18, he committed a heinous crime. Tonga kidnapped and molested a 5-year-old girl. Local officers suspected Tony's involvement and tracked him down with the girl, where they discovered the distressing scene with the child's pants down. Tony was convicted of 7 charges, including indecent assault and attempting to abduct 2 other children. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for these offenses. Tony was released in December 2013, just 5 months before Blessie's tragic murder, and he violated his release conditions twice in a short period. As a result, he was deemed a danger, prompting an extended supervision order that required a decade of monitoring and a 24-hour GPS tracking system. The judge overseeing this case, Cleat Justice Edwin Wiley, expressed serious concerns about Tony's proclivity for violence. "I'm satisfied that Mr. Robertson poses a significant risk. I believe he will commit indecency against a child under the age of 12 and abduct a child for sexual purposes. The evidence leads to the conclusion that he is impulsive and unable to control his anger and aggressions. Mr. Robertson has a preference for, and proclivity for, sexual offenses. He has expressed no remorse. Indeed, he still denies it." The tragic circumstances surrounding Tony's release from the monitoring order, as well as the subsequent violent attack on Blessie Goding, caused her family great pain and anger. The fact that Tony, despite being monitored with a GPS anklet, was able to commit such a heinous crime exacerbated Blessie's family's grief, as they believed the system had failed them. A government report was conducted to look into how the police and corrections departments handled Tony's case. However, the report found no fault with their actions and concluded that Tony was solely responsible for the blessing. Despite the lack of blame placed on the authorities, the report made 27 recommendations to improve the management of high-risk offenders. Blessie's husband, Antonio, expressed disappointment and devastation with the inquiry's findings, claiming that corrections lacked the capacity to manage high-risk sex offenders, and that, in his opinion, the offenders controlled the system. The Minister of Corrections stated that Tony had served his full 8-year prison sentence for the previous offense and had been denied parole several times due to his lack of remorse. Residents of Birkdale, Auckland, were not notified of his release into their community. In a statement released by New Zealand police, Antonio expressed his family's profound loss. "Blessie is the light of our home, and without her, we would be lost in the dark. Right now, we're just trying to pretend everything is fine. But deep down, we are heartbroken. We've been robbed. She has left too soon." Share your opinion with us in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we'll talk about what happened in Maine in 2016. While her husband Luke was shopping at Walmart, Valerie Tiemann, 34, vanished from the parking lot. There was no sign of Valerie when he got back in the car. The police opened an investigation as soon as they heard about Valerie's disappearance, but it soon took a surprising turn. Sarah Jean Sampsarmanen and Jean Allharman welcomed Valerie Jo Harmanen into the world on December 3, 1981, in Salem, Virginia. Valerie attended Hampton Park Christian School and graduated in 2000. She was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina. She graduated from Bob Jones University with a degree in cosmetology. She was well known for her gregarious demeanor and warm smile. Valerie was well known for her passion for speech and theater. She played the flute and piano and loved music. Valerie worked in pageants, spas, and salons using her cosmetology skills. She helped people look and feel their best in order to support them. Valerie had been seeing a man named Matt Guccio. When Valerie was around 22, they met through a mutual friend. In many ways, they were too dissimilar. Matt was more reserved, but Valerie was gregarious and happy. However, they did not find this difference problematic. Valerie and Matt were married in 2004. They moved into Matt's tiny house after the honeymoon, and while everything was great at first, Valerie's parents started to notice behavioral changes over time. Matt was very frugal with his money. To have some personal savings, Valerie had to open a different bank account. Matt's behavior changed more and more over time. He attempted to exert total control over Valerie's life and held her responsible for all of his and their family's issues. She endured a great deal of emotional suffering and a lot of things, but patience has its limits. Matt and Valerie got divorced 10 years later. Valerie wanted a new chapter in her life, and Luke Tiemann opened it. He helped Valerie move past her past issues. Luke spent 10 years in the army. Valerie saw him as a trustworthy man who cared for her family while he was in Iraq and Afghanistan. Valerie was starting to look happy again. Valerie was once again smiling and full of joy as she had been 10 years before. Luke and Valerie entered into marriage on June 6, 2014. They relocated to the Fairfield home of Luke's parents. Luke was living in Maine at the time, and Valerie's parents were in South Carolina. After visiting Valerie's family in South Carolina, Luke and Valerie returned to Maine in August 2016. The final text message exchange between Valerie's mother, Sarah Jean Harmon, and her daughter took place on August 18, 2016. Luke was spotted with a woman he had begun chatting with on Facebook a week prior, on August 24, 2016. This woman and Luke Tiemann had sex on the evening of August 24, 2016, and it appears that Valerie learned of it that evening. In 5 hours, Valerie called Luke 31 times. A mutual friend of Luke and Valerie reached out to the latter through Messenger on August 26, 2016. Valerie was told by a friend that Luke was getting sucked into other women and claiming that they were no longer together. Valerie replied in multiple messages that, although it was heartbreaking, everything would work out because God has a timing and he would never find a better woman than her. She also said that he had lost her the following month in 2016. Luke Tiemann moved into the home of a woman with whom he was having an affair and told Valerie, his wife, that Valerie had fled with another man. Every week, Valerie would call her parents in South Carolina, but now they were unable to get in touch with their daughter for over a week. They couldn't get in touch with their daughter because she didn't answer their calls or texts. Luke was decided by Alan Harmon and Sarah Harmon. Speak with Luke. They texted him to inquire about his and Luke's well-being. The following day, Luke replied, "We are good. Thank you, love her so much." Another 13 days have passed, but Valerie's parents still can't contact Luso. They call Luke's father. They were shocked by the man's response. Valerie had been missing for approximately 2 weeks, according to Luke's father. In addition, he consulted Valerie's parents about what to do with her belongings. After that, Luke Tiemann was questioned about why he hadn't informed them about their daughter. "I was waiting for her to get in touch with you because," Tiemann said, "I never speak poorly of her. I still adore each of you." Luke said Valerie had run off with another man, and he thought she would tell her parents that they had broken up. Sarah Jean and Alan knew it wasn't true. It was a far cry from their daughter's behavior. Valerie couldn't have done that, they were certain. They also thought she would have called them, since she was aware of their concerns. Alan reported a missing person to the Fairfield Police Department the following day, September 9, 2016. Investigators began by visiting Valerie's parents, who were the residents of Luke Tiemann. They spoke with Laurel Tiemann, who told them she didn't know where they were. Since Valerie was, the detectives left without finding out where Laurel Tiemann's were. Because of Laurel Tiemann's domineering behavior, Valerie's parents felt it was difficult for their daughter to share a home with her. Laurel packed everything she owned in trash bags after Valerie was gone for 2 weeks. It was a clear representation of Laurel's daughter-in-law. She wasn't worried about Valerie at all. All she wanted to do was get rid of her things so they wouldn't occupy space in the house. The police meant to find Luke Tiemann and ask him a few questions, but they couldn't locate him. He didn't show up at his home, and his parents said they didn't know where their son might be. However, 5 days after Valerie's disappearance, Luke took the initiative to call the police himself. He claimed to have heard that the detectives were interested in speaking with him. When and under what circumstances he had last seen Valerie was one of the questions the detectives asked him. About 2 weeks ago, he and Valerie went to the local Walmart to buy some food, and he said that the response was really strange. While he went shopping, Valerie remained in the car in the parking lot. He finished his shopping and went back to the car, but Valerie was gone. According to Luke, he tried to find Valerie and promised to take her back by calling and texting her after leaving the store and realizing she wasn't there. Luke also disclosed that Valerie and he were approaching the end of their marriage. He claims that Valerie once brought up another man in a conversation, and he thought she was having an affair with him. Luke didn't know the man's name or where he lived. He believed Valerie had fled with him. The police appealed to the public through the media because Valerie's family was not aware of Luke Tieman's existence. They asked anyone who has seen Valerie in the past few weeks to report it to detectives by posting a picture of her. From Valerie's disappearance from the Walmart parking lot to the disposal of her possessions in garbage bags, the whole story seemed strange. The fact that Luke Tieman did nothing to find his wife was another intriguing element of the narrative. He might have been too preoccupied with another woman. On the day that Valerie vanished, investigators visited Luke Walmart, where Luke and Valerie were. There were surveillance cameras inside the building as well as outside. Consequently, it was simple to verify Luke's story. Examining the CCTV footage took the investigators over an hour. They were in for a surprise. Lucy did not see Valerie or Luke Tieman in any of the recordings. Luch implied that Luch had lied to the police. The police were now aware that he was concealing something. The investigators chose to have a face-to-face conversation with Luke. They did not, however, reveal all of the information they possessed. They thought he would embellish or alter some of Lucci's testimony. It was no secret that Lucci was seeing another woman, Billie Jo Goodman. The fact that he was unfaithful to Valerie was not denied by him. He claimed that his relationship with Billie Jo was an effort to move on from Valerie's breakup. She was in a number of failed relationships. She thought she could start a future with Luke Tieman when they first met. Another question now faced the investigators. Is it possible that Valerie acted as a mediator between Lucas and Billie Jo? Maybe these two chose to get rid of everything that might interfere with their plans in order to begin a new life. Billie Jo spoke with the police. She thought Louis had already separated from his wife. She claimed to investigators that she had no knowledge of Valerie Tieman's disappearance. Meanwhile, one of the residents gave the police a tip. In one of the parking lots, the man had discovered a driver's license in the grass. The driver's license that was discovered belonged to Valerie, and this parking lot was adjacent to Billie Jo's house. Many people were suspicious because Valerie's driver's license was located close to her husband's new girlfriend's home. Few people think that on September 19, 2016, 10 days after Valerie's father, Alan, reported her missing to the police, Valerie fled with another man, leaving behind all of her possessions and discarding her documents. Luke Tieman spoke with the news center Maine about the police. When he got back, Valerie wasn't in the car. He told reporters about Walmart. He didn't know Walmart had security camera footage. His story was not supported by footage. Without a doubt, after hearing Luke Tieman's words and seeing his actions, each of you has drawn your own conclusions. On September 20, 2016, the following day, this case took a surprising turn. A.S. Luke warrant was obtained by detectives for the Fairfield property owned by Luke's parents. This was, after all, Valerie's last known residence. During the search, police dogs that are trained to detect human remains participated. His stream, and the land lot were to be checked. After searching the woods behind the house for about 5 minutes, a police dog discovered something. As the officer dug through the dirt with his hand, he noticed a shoe protruding from the ground. He was joined by other officers, who also began digging while wearing gloves. They discovered the body of a woman, wrapped in a blanket, and buried it with a number of odd items. These items included a package of sweet tarts, a bag of potato chips, a bottle of Gucci perfume, a flannel shirt, a handwritten note, a Mason note, and a wedding ring, an item that was not found until the evidence was being packaged for trial. While handling the con jar, Sergeant Scott Bryant, chief of Maine's evidence response team, testified that he discovered the ring. There were twigs and flower stems made of dirt in the mason jar. I knew there was something heavy in the envelope when I heard a thud. According to Bryant, it was still unknown if the ring belonged to a man or a woman, but according to Bryant, the discovered ring was significantly larger than his own wedding band. For my sole happiness, the police read the soiled and soiled handwritten note that was discovered with Valerie's body. Joy, you will always bloom. I love you, Valerie, the note read. May you rest in peace with Jesus in my heart, Joy. I am looking forward to seeing you again. T. Lucio Bear, signed Lucy Bear. Teeman Lucy Bear Sirs claimed in a police recording that he gave himself the nickname Lucy Bear and used it to sign a number of other notes discovered in Valerie's purse throughout the course of the investigation. Valerie's death was connected to all of Lucy's possessions. They took the body. For an autopsy and identification, the body was brought to the forensic medical examiner's office. Unfortunately, the body discovered behind the Teeman family home actually belonged to their daughter, V. Lucre, so Jean and Alan Harmon had to worry about the worst thing their parents could hear. In addition to Valerie and Luke, the house was also occupied by his parents and younger brother Sam. Detectives discovered Sam's landscaping tools in the barn. Valerie discovered a contraband device in the same barn where Sam had dug up the burial site using these tools. Detectives soon discovered that Sam, Luke's younger brother, had engaged in illicit substance use. When Valerie visited her parents in South Carolina, she told them she used illegal drugs, which led the police to look into whether Sam Teeman was involved in Valerie's death. When investigators searched Valerie's parents' bedroom, they found a .45 caliber handgun that Luke Teeman had bought in 2015. Luke's parents told investigators they were unaware Valerie was buried close to their home. It's difficult to accept that this was the case, of course. Around the same time that Valerie was located, investigators found Luke and Billy Joe, his new friend. Luke Teeman was taken into custody by investigators and taken to the police station to be questioned. He told the investigators Valerie had used illegal drugs and had overdosed and died nearly 25 months ago on August 25th. It is alleged that Lucian did not want Valerie's parents to be aware of their daughter's illicit drug use. He didn't tell them anything because of this. Since she was already dead, her husband knew that 911 would not be able to help her, so he chose not to call. As an alternative, he left Valerie in bed until nightfall. When it grew dark, he wrapped her in a blanket, left a note outside, and led her to the house in the woods. After that, Luke Clary was buried in a hole that Luke and his brother Sam had dug. Valerie had no physical wounds prior to her passing, according to Luke. Luke Teeman was lying, though, according to the autopsy results, which showed that Valerie's blood had no traces of illegal substances, only traces of prescription medications were found. It wasn't the most unexpected thing, though. 2 gunshot wounds to Valerie's head and neck were the cause of her death. According to the results of the ballistics analysis, investigators used a .45 caliber handgun to fire the bullets that were taken from Valerie's body. When investigators searched Luke's parents' bedroom, they discovered the same gun. He claimed to have purchased a Buga Gohei gun for his father approximately a year ago, but he did not deny owning one. He asserted that he was unaware that Valerie had a loop shot. Valerie's age is 32. Luke Teeman was charged with the murder of Valerie Teeman, 34. The police were unable to uncover any proof that her brother was involved in Valerie Teeman's death when they were investigating her death at the age of 4. According to Luke, his younger brother, Sam helped him bury Valerie's body. But according to the police, Sam wasn't home when Valerie died, and it's still unclear if his parents knew about it or had anything to do with it. However, it's rather odd that they didn't hear 2018. The 5-day trial started with opening statements on April 2, 2018, at Somerset Skowhegan's principal court. Luke entered a not guilty plea and claimed that he had been set up, although he insisted he wouldn't have left incriminating objects like a note and an engagement ring close to Valerie's body. The investigation linked Luke Teeman to every item discovered there. After looking over the data on both Luke's and Valerie's phones, a computer forensics specialist also testified. The last time Valerie's phone was used, according to the records, was August 25, 2016, the day authorities think she died. The majority of the detective's time was devoted to outlining the process for monitoring cell phone usage and how it can be used to ascertain an individual's location at the time of a call. According to the documents, Valerie allegedly spent time with his friend Billy Joe while making 31 calls in a single day. Valerie only took the final call, which lasted a little more than 13 minutes. By the end of the call, police think he was at home. Another woman accused him of cheating on her in a message that Valerie received the following morning. After that, she refused to be with Tiemann again, and his defense questioned these phone logs. Luke's younger brother, Sam Tiemann, testified against his brother in court. Sam told the jury that he had no relationship with the 28-year-old, despite Luke's claims to the police that he helped him bury Valerie. Saways, 28, had his work log to prove that he was actually working 2 hours away. Sam testified in court that he overheard his brother confess to being an accomplice, and that Luke chose to confront him about it. He asked Luke why, and he responded with claims. Luke said, "What else do you do with a dead body?" in response to what he said. Luke kept asking questions about Luke, pointing the finger at Sam's parents and accusing him of shooting Valerie. Tiemann said that neither she nor Sam's parents could Luke anything like that. The officer questioned whether PTSD was the reason behind Luke's blackout. He had previously admitted to police that he occasionally had flashbacks due to his PTSD. Afterwards, witnesses that the prosecutor brought to the court discussed Valerie's side of the story and Valerie's team behind closed doors. They testified that the couple used a lot of illegal substances and that Luke informed people that he was divorcing Valerie at the same time that Valerie's ex-girlfriend, Sam's girlfriend, was getting a divorce. Sam Jackie Spencer, the older brother, told jurors that she and the couple had a wonderful relationship. At their wedding, she even served as the maid of honor. Spencer testified that she saw Valerie and Luke using a variety of illegal substances together. Spencer claimed that, around the time Valerie disappeared, Luke began texting her frequently. She had always sensed that he was interested in dating her. "He used to tell me that he always felt a connection to me. According to Spencer, he has always wanted to get together or hang out." Jurors were shown additional evidence from the crime scene in addition to witnesses who knew the couple personally. 3 minutes after Valerie's body was found, a video showed the officer walking through dense forest on an overgrown ATV trail, a common sight behind many rural Maine homes, to Tiemann's house. At the Tiemann Lucidance, members of the evidence response team gave testimony regarding their fee. Tiemann. Luke's defense team quickly objected to a few items, such as a .45 caliber handgun taken from one of the home's rooms and gardening tools found in a property. Tiemann Smith, a team attorney, NC attorney, argued that the state assumed the gun and ammunition that Tiemann had taken because they were discovered in the house. They noted that they never confirmed who owned them, suggesting that someone else in the house might have had access to them. UC Tiemann gave his closing remarks on the 5th day of the trial. Despite his own objections, he testified. Tiemann admitted that he had made many changes to his version. To protect his clients, he provided investigators with multiple stories, he told the jury. According to Luke, he was forced to make a false statement by the detectives. He said he had no motive to take his wife's life and that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime. All the evidence pointed to Tiemann, the prosecutor, as the only person who could hurt Valerie. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding Tiemann guilty. On May 11, 2018, the jury announced the verdict. Valerie T. Mother's Mothmog, Thayed, acknowledged her sincere grief and heartache in her statement at the sentencing hearing. Luke is an evil-hearted man who should be sentenced to life in prison because of his persistent denial of the events, which disgusts me greatly. In addition, Luke's mother spoke for her son. She requested that the court take into account Luke Ken Tiemann's entire life. She said, "I don't ask you to ignore evidence, but I ask you to consider the whole person and balance justice with me." When his parents pleaded for the judge's pity, Tiemann sobbed. His mother, La Tiemann, claimed that her son was changed after returning from 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. "I'm asking for understanding," she said, adding that she wasn't trying to use post-traumatic stress disorder as an excuse. Valerie's parents wanted Luke Tiemann to receive a life sentence, but he was given a 55-year sentence. The attorney for Harmon's family was shocked to learn that Tiemann's defense did not use post-traumatic stress disorder to obtain a lighter sentence for him. Tiemann changed his testimony once more, but this did not help him either. Tiemann appealed, but it did not have the desired effect while he was incarcerated. Why, in your opinion, did Luke Tiemann bury Valerie's body with other items? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. On Thursday, December 16, 2004, Bobby Jo Stinnett, a 23-year-old woman who was 8 months pregnant with her first child, eagerly awaited the arrival of her baby girl. Born on December 4, 1981, she graduated from Nottoway High School in Graham, Missouri, in 2000. Bobby, who lived in Skidmore, Missouri with her husband, Zeb Stinnett, was a well-known and gentle person in the small farming community. Her love of animals, particularly dogs and horses, was evident, and she ran a dog breeding business called Happy Haven Farms from her home. Specializing in the breeding of rat terriers, Bobby actively participated in dog shows and discussions in the online dog breeding community. Her business involves listing puppies for sale, and on December 15, 2004, she received an instant message from Darlene Fisher, a woman from Fairfax, Missouri, whom she had met through their interactions on the Router Chatter forum. Bobby and Darlene had been exchanging messages for weeks, bonding not only over their shared love of rat terriers, but also over their shared pregnancy experiences. Darlene informed Bobby that she was interested in purchasing one of her puppies, and they agreed to meet the next day. Bobby made plans to meet Darlene, and informed her mother, Becky Harper, that she would pick her up from work at 3:30 p.m. On the scheduled date, December 16th, Becky called Bobby at 2:30 p.m. Bobby reassured her as they confirmed the arrangement for picking her up from work. However, when Becky finished work at 3:30 p.m., Bobby was nowhere to be found. Becky tried to call Bobby, but there was no response, so she walked to Bobby's house, which was only 2 blocks from her workplace. When Becky got to the house, she noticed the front door was open. She entered and called out to Bobby without getting a response. As she entered the dining room, she saw a terrifying scene. Her daughter was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, distraught. Becky immediately dialed 911, urgently describing the dire situation, mentioning that her daughter was 8 months pregnant and that Bobby's stomach appeared to have been severely injured. When the police arrived, they discovered that Bobby's unborn baby had been forcibly removed from her womb, and the infant's whereabouts and survival were unknown. Locating the perpetrator became an urgent priority because the baby could still be alive. Unfortunately, Bobby did not survive the brutal attack. Both Becky and Bobby's husband informed the police that Bobby was going to meet a woman named Darlene, who expressed an interest in buying a puppy. Aside from that, they had no idea how many other visitors would be arriving that day. Through a quick investigation, the police tracked Darlene down using text messages and IP addresses from the computer she used to communicate. It was discovered that the woman posing as Darlene was not named Darlene and did not live in Fairfax. Her real name was Lisa Montgomery, and she lived in Melbourne. Lisa drove from Melbourne to Skidmore on December 16th and arrived at Bobby's house around 12:30 p.m. Police believe the baby was taken between 2:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. On December 17th, the police arrived at Lisa Montgomery's home, and her husband Kevin greeted them at the door. They entered and found Lisa in the living room, cradling a newborn baby. The police informed Kevin and Lisa that they were looking into the murder of Bobby Jo Stinnett and inquired about the baby. Lisa claimed that her child was born at a women's clinic in Topeka. "I am looking for a private conversation." The police approached Lisa outside her home. She informed them of this and requested that Kevin not know about it due to financial constraints. She had actually given birth at home, not at the women's clinic. Lisa claimed she was alone in her kitchen during the birth, but she did have the phone numbers of 2 friends in case she needed help. When asked about the placenta, Lisa says she disposed of it in a nearby creek. Lisa requested that the matter be discussed further at the sheriff's office to maintain privacy, and the police agreed. Lisa confessed to officers at the sheriff's office. After killing Bobby, she extracted the baby from her womb and abducted her. The baby was eventually returned to Bobby's husband, who named her Victoria Jo Stinnett. Lisa was charged with kidnapping, which led to her death. During Lisa's trial, the court learned that she and Bobby met at a dog show in April 2004. "We were both members of an online dog breeding community when Bobby announced her pregnancy. Lisa, a member, learned of her pregnancy in the spring of 2004. Around the same time, Lisa informed her family and friends that she was expecting. Lisa failed to disclose that she had a sterilization procedure more than a decade ago, rendering her infertile. Lisa deceived people for 8 months by pretending to be pregnant. She went so far as to wear maternity clothes and purchase baby items. Despite her sterilization, Lisa persuaded her husband, Kevin, and her children that she was actually pregnant. On the other hand, Lisa's first husband and wife, who were aware of her sterilization, accused her of lying. In response, Lisa insisted on proving them wrong. During the court proceedings, it was revealed that on December 16th, Lisa arrived at Bobby's house with a sharp kitchen knife and a white cord in her jacket pocket. When Bobby answered the door, Lisa asked to see the puppy she wanted to buy. Bobby retrieved the puppies and took them outside for Lisa to interact with. Lisa attacked Becky shortly after she called Bobby to pick her up. Lisa strangled Bobby with the cord she had brought until she lost consciousness. When Bobby regained consciousness and resisted, Lisa tightened the cord, resulting in Bobby's death. Lisa then cut into Bobby's abdomen with a kitchen knife, successfully removing the baby. Lisa left after cutting the umbilical cord. Surprisingly, the baby remained unharmed. Throughout her journey, Lisa took precautions to ensure the baby's well-being, such as clapping the umbilical cord and clearing mucus from his mouth. Lisa had a car seat ready in her vehicle for the baby. When Lisa arrived at a parking lot near a women's clinic in Topeka, Kansas, she called her husband, Kevin, to tell him she had given birth. Kevin met her in the parking lot and named the baby Abigail. The next day, they went out for breakfast, proudly introducing their new baby, Abigail, to everyone. The prosecution contended that Bobby's tragic death and the baby's abduction were the result of Lisa's calculated and cold-blooded plan to protect the lies she had told her friends and family. According to the prosecution, Lisa was afraid that her first husband, Carl Bowman, would discover her lies during their custody battle. Lisa was concerned that this revelation would jeopardize her position in court proceedings, so she felt compelled to have a baby as proof that her pregnancy was genuine. The prosecution claimed that Lisa purposefully misled her family and friends about her pregnancy and meticulously planned the abduction of a baby to maintain the illusion. They claimed Lisa's plan was meticulously planned and executed with precision. To hide her identity, Lisa contacted Bobby under a fictitious name, hoping that the crime could not be traced back to her. Concurrently, she continued to inform everyone she knew about her pregnancy. Lisa went so far as to purchase a home birth kit and conduct online research on how to perform a cesarean section. Sheriff Strong, who played a role in the case, stated that the crime was meticulously planned, and Lisa persisted in lying until she was caught. Lisa even tried to implicate her own brother, claiming he was with her when the baby was abducted. However, his verified alibi revealed that this was yet another falsehood. The prosecution claimed Lisa was involved in a custody battle with her first husband, who, upon learning that she had informed her second husband, Kevin, about her pregnancy, questioned the veracity of her claim. Aware of Lisa's inability to conceive, he sent emails expressing his intention to reveal the alleged lie to Kevin, whom he exploited during custody proceedings. In response, Lisa, determined to prove him wrong, took a series of actions that culminated in the tragic events less than a week before Bobby's death on December 10th. Lisa's first husband formally filed a motion seeking a change of custody for the two minor children who lived with Lisa. To back up their case, the prosecution called Dr. Dietz as an expert witness. This move was prompted by the defense's prior notification that they intended to pursue an insanity defense, claiming Lisa was experiencing pseudopsychoses. During the trial, Dr. Dietz testified that there are two types of phenomena known as pseudoscience, the first of which involves a woman genuinely and sincerely believing she is pregnant. Typically, this belief ends when the woman is presented with concrete evidence that she is not pregnant. Individuals with this type of pseudopsychosis are not considered mentally ill and do not have delusions. Dr. Dietz describes a second type of pseudoscience that is linked to mental illness, specifically schizophrenia. Individuals suffering from this condition experience delusions, particularly the delusion of being pregnant. Notably, this form is distinguished by the presence of a strong conviction. In contrast to the first example, people who believe in pseudoscience refuse to accept evidence that contradicts their beliefs. They have a firm and unwavering belief in their pregnancy, which demonstrates the impact of mental illness. Dr. Dietz, in his expert opinion, concluded that Lisa did not have pseudopsychosis at the time of Bobby's death. He came to this conclusion based on his belief that Lisa did not truly believe she was pregnant. In court, Dr. Dietz explained his reasoning by emphasizing several key points. To begin, Dr. Diet stated that Lisa was well aware that she had undergone permanent sterilization, which removed any doubt about her reproductive abilities. Lisa had consistently sought medical and prenatal care in previous pregnancies, but this was not the case during the current period. Dr. Dietz provided additional evidence in the form of Lisa's insurance application from September 2004, in which she explicitly stated that she was not pregnant. Furthermore, Dr. Dietz stated that Lisa's behavior was not consistent with delusional thinking. He explained that in cases of pregnancy delusion, people would stick to the same story and willingly disclose it despite being persuaded or presented with contradictory evidence. However, Lisa lacked these characteristics, prompting Dr. Deeds to dismiss the idea that she was having a pregnancy delusion. Lisa's case was characterized by inconsistent and contradictory accounts of key details. Notably, her stories differed on the sex of the fetus, whether she was expecting twins or a single fetus, and how she planned to deliver. These differences were noticeable depending on the audience to whom she spoke, indicating a lack of consistency and reliability in her statements. Furthermore, Lisa provided conflicting information about the location where she claimed to have given birth. She initially claimed that the birth occurred at a women's clinic, but later changed her story to say that it happened at home. When confronted with her brother's alleged presence at Bobby's house during the incident, Lisa claimed that she had had amnesia both before and during Bobby's murder. Dr. Dietz concluded that Lisa was a malingerer during the 2004 pregnancy, and the court heard that Lisa had faked previous pregnancies. Lisa claimed to have had multiple pregnancies in the years since her sterilization procedure, each with its own set of complications. Lisa's feigned pregnancies date back to 1994. Subsequently, in 2000, before marrying Kevin, she informed him of her pregnancy and expressed a desire for an abortion. Kevin gave her $40, but there was no further discussion or evidence of pregnancy. Lisa claimed to be pregnant again in 2002, informing Kevin of a doctor's appointment while denying him the opportunity to accompany her. However, her doctor testified that he only tweeted Lisa about unrelated issues, such as ankle pain and a cold, and did not provide prenatal care. Lisa later informed Kevin that the baby had died and claimed to have donated the body to science, adding to her history of deception surrounding food and pregnancies. The defense's case focused on the defense of insanity, and they planned to call experts to testify about Lisa's mental disease or defect. Lisa's life was described in court as troubled. They claimed she had been physically and sexually abused by her stepfather. Lisa married her stepbrother Carl Bowman when she was 18 years old, and they had 4 children before undergoing sterilization. Following their divorce in 1998, Carl remarried, and Lisa later married Kevin to back up their insanity claims. Dr. Logan and Dr. Ramachandran were called as expert witnesses by the defense. Lisa was diagnosed by both experts with a variety of mental health issues, including depression, borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and pseudopsychosis. Dr. Ramachandran testified about pseudopsychosis, describing it as a somatoform disorder in which the patient develops the delusion of being pregnant. According to his testimony, this delusion is driven by a strong desire to become pregnant, which causes hormonal changes that result in physical changes consistent with pregnancy. Dr. Ramachandran believed Lisa suffered from an intense pseudopsychosis delusion. During his testimony, he claimed that Lisa was in a dissociative state when she killed Bobby and delivered the baby. Dr. Ramachandran suggested that Lisa's childhood sexual abuse made her susceptible to pseudopsychosis. He claimed Lisa's internet searches and purchases of baby-related items indicated pseudopsychosis. Furthermore, Dr. Ramachandran believed Lisa was suffering from a severe mental illness or defect that prevented her from fully understanding the nature and quality of her actions. Following 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding Lisa guilty of kidnapping resulting in death. The following day, she received a death sentence. The jury unanimously agreed that the government had proven all statutory and non-statutory aggravating factors beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution contended that these factors included the crime being committed in a particularly heinous or depraved manner, involving serious physical abuse of Bobby Joe Stinnett. The jury agreed with this argument, and Elise was sentenced to death by lethal injection with pentobarbital at Terre Haute Prison in Indiana. Lisa eventually found herself on death row in a federal prison in Texas, designed for female inmates with special medical and psychological needs. She received psychiatric care while incarcerated there. Lisa formed a new defense team in an effort to have her death sentence commuted to life in prison. Their central argument was that, given Lisa's history of horrific abuse, the death penalty was unjust. They claimed that her legal representation during her initial trial failed to fully disclose the extent of her thesis's profound hardships and that the defense presented was inadequate. Lisa was in a psychotic state, according to the new defense team, when she committed the crime. Furthermore, they presented evidence that Lisa's history of abuse began before her birth, as she was born with fetal alcohol syndrome as a result of her mother's heavy drinking. The defense detailed specific instances of abuse, claiming that Lisa was subjected to physical beatings and that the mistreatment worsened after her mother remarried. They claimed Lisa had been sexually abused by her stepfather. Despite the efforts of Lisa's legal team, who argued that pressure and the threat of exposure from her first husband drove her to fabricate a pregnancy, their objections and appeals to have her removed from death row were denied. The execution went as planned. Lisa received a lethal injection in Terre Haute, Indiana, after the United States Supreme Court lifted a last-minute stay of execution. As the sole female inmate on federal death row in the United States, she was the first female federal inmate executed by the government in 67 years preceding her execution. When asked if she wanted to make a statement, Lisa declined. She was officially declared dead at 1:31 on January 13, 2021. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The son of a wealthy businessman, 6-year-old Robert Bobby Cosgrove Greenlease Jr., was abducted from his school, Notre Dame de Sion in Kansas City, Missouri, on September 28, 1953. As the authorities began a large search for the young boy, the city was engulfed in panic and commotion, but the abductor eluded capture. Soon after, Bobby's family started getting a flurry of phone calls and letters demanding an outrageous sum of money in exchange for their son's safe return. The case's twists and turns became even more startling as it attracted national notice. Who was responsible for the abduction? Was it a stranger or a member of the family? Would Bobby's family ever be reconciled with him if he were ever discovered alive? We are examining Bobby Greenlease's unsettling situation today. So let's go straight to the riddle without any more ado. With a population of over 500,000, Kansas City is situated in the western region of Missouri. It is Missouri's biggest city. With a variety of eateries, retail establishments, and entertainment venues, the Kansas City Power and Light District is one of the city's most recognizable attractions. The Kaufman Center for the Performing Arts and the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art provide visitors more opportunities to see the city's thriving art scene. It's difficult to forget the horrifying crime that previously took place in this city in the 1950s, though, despite all of the beauty and excitement. Multi-millionaire Robert Greenlease Sr. lived in Kansas City's affluent Mission Hills area and had it all. He was a vehicle dealer with locations all throughout the nation. Early in the 20th century, he brought General Motors automobiles to the Great Plains, which is how he made his money. The birth of his son, Robert Bobby Cosgrove Greenlease Jr., on February 3, 1947, at the age of 65, permanently altered his life. Robert's second wife was Virginia Pollock, Bobby's mother. The Greenlease family was loyal to their beloved Bobby and had a luxurious lifestyle. Virginia, his older sister, was born in 1941, therefore he wasn't an only child. In addition, he had a 1917-born half-brother named Paul. Robert's first marriage produced a son named Paul. Bobby was enrolled at the esteemed Notre Dame de Sion, a private Catholic school situated at 3823 Locust Avenue in Kansas City, when he was 6 years old in 1953. He developed alongside his contemporaries there. Bobby's future was bright and everything was going well, but destiny had other ideas for the young child and his family. On the morning of September 28, 1953, Bobby's school, Notre Dame de Sion, was much like any other day. Nobody could have predicted, though, how tragically this day would shortly turn out. When Sister Moran, the nun on duty that day, opened the school door at about 11 in the morning, she was met by a chubby woman who claimed to be Bobby's aunt. The woman revealed that Virginia, the boy's mother, had been taken to St. Mary's Hospital after suffering a heart attack while shopping at the Country Club Plaza. She continued by saying that she was told to take the boy to his mother right away by the Greenlease family. Sister Moran went to get Bobby from his classroom without thinking twice. The 6-year-old, who was naive and trusted people, had no reason to suspect the woman's identity or motivations. The nun watched as he took the woman's hand and they both climbed into a taxi and drove away. She figured everything was all right. Nobody realized that the woman wasn't Bobby's aunt. And what happened that day would forever alter the Greenlease family's course in life. Virginia will never forget the phone call she got less than an hour after the unidentified woman took Bobby. Another nun from Bobby's school, Sister Martha Anna, was on the other end of the telephone. She had called the family's residence to ask about Virginia's alleged heart attack. However, the nun was shocked to learn that nothing similar had occurred. Virginia had not suffered a heart attack and was not in the hospital. Both Virginia and the nun quickly realized that something evil was going on, and they quickly came to the conclusion that Bobby had been abducted. Virginia immediately called her husband Robert after speaking with Sister Martha over the phone and told him what had transpired. Like his wife, Robert was astounded and perplexed. As soon as possible, he reported the offense to the Kansas City Police Department. To help with the problem, the FBI was also called in. As word spread that Bobby had been abducted, panic swept the city. Despite launching a large manhunt, the authorities were unable to find the woman who had abducted the boy, which hindered their efforts. Hope started to wane as the hours passed. However, Bobby's parents received the first of many ransom notes on the same day that Bobby was seized. Signed by a person going by M, the letter requested $600,000, 0 cents, to ensure Bobby's safe return. It was an astounding sum of money, more than $6 million, 0 cents in today's dollars. The demands, however, did not end there. Additionally, M demanded that the ransom money be paid in $10, 0 cents, and $20, 0 cents small denomination notes. After learning of the ransom note, the authorities set to work finding the enigmatic M and securing Bobby's release. An additional ransom note arrived on September 29, 1953. This time, a pin Bobby had been wearing the day he was abducted was sent with the letter. Desperate to ensure his son's release, Robert made the decision to go collect the ransom money and sought assistance from connections and trusted friends. Among them was Commerce Trust Company Executive Vice President Arthur Eisenhower. In addition, he was the brother of the U.S. President at the time. Eisenhower made sure that all bank clerks handling the ransom money noted the bill's serial numbers, which were then published in newspapers across the nation. As Bobby's family continued to collect the astronomical ransom requested by the kidnapper, the excruciating wait for his safe return seemed to drag on forever. A man called the Greenlease home several times during this period to let Virginia know her son was still alive. Despite the family's desperation, the kidnapper appeared to relish his perverse game. 6 ransom letters and 15 phone calls were sent to the family in a week. Additionally, they consented to follow all of the kidnapper's directions, but they would quickly come to the realization that they had made a grave error. Robert amassed an incredible $600,000, 0 cents in ransom money for his son's safe return by the evening of October 4, 1953. The funds were then transferred to a bridge close to Highway 40, just east of Kansas City, in a duffel bag. At the time, it was the biggest ransom ever paid in American history. The kidnappers contacted the Greenleases early the following morning to verify that they had recovered the money and that Bobby would be returned in a day. However, no information on the boy's whereabouts was released as the day wore on. Anxiously, the family awaited any updates, but none arrived. The Greenleases were left to question whether the kidnappers had deceived them or whether their son was still alive. It felt like their darkest worries were going to come true, and the tension was excruciating. The most challenging and devastating period of their lives would be the following 24 hours. An ex-convict and taxi driver named Joe Carr was set to become a key player in the inquiry as Bobby's quest went on. In the state of St. Louis, a guy by the name of Carl Austin Hall had employed him as his personal driver. Carr was aware that Hall was a newcomer to the area and was spending money carelessly. Hall was living like a king after renting an apartment and purchasing new clothing. Carr chose to get in touch with his employer at the taxi firm Joe Costello because he was skeptical of Hall's actions. In addition to having links within the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, Costello was a man with ties to the mob. On October 6, 1953, after the sun had fallen, Costello tipped Patrolman Elmer Dolan and Lieutenant Louis Shoulders about the man showing off a lot of cash in St. Louis. They hurried to Hall's residence where he was and took him into custody. The officers discovered 2 heavy metal suitcases stuffed full of cash inside the room. The sight was stunning. After that, Hall was taken to the Newstead police station in North St. Louis, where he was questioned by the police on the money's origin. Hall insisted that he had done nothing illegal at first, but investigators quickly started to piece the puzzle together. Because Hall had so much cash on him, they assumed he was implicated in the kidnapping of Greenlease. Hall eventually broke under pressure and admitted his involvement in the crime. However, the most startling discovery was still to come. When questioned about Bobby's whereabouts, he disclosed that the boy had passed away. He had not acted alone, Hall disclosed. A woman named Bonnie Hetty was his accomplice. They had come up with the idea to kidnap Bobby and demand a large ransom from his affluent parents. Investigators were able to piece together the events and discover the startling specifics of how the kidnapping took place, thanks to Hall's confession and a comprehensive background investigation. It was a network of treachery and deceit, with avarice at its core. It was discovered by authorities that Hall was from a wealthy family. He was a lawyer's son. He received a sizable inheritance and his parents' 1,100-acre Pleasanton, Kansas homestead after they died. However, Hall's life took a turn for the worst when he lost his riches, was divorced, and developed an addiction. When he was condemned to the Missouri State Penitentiary for robbing a cab driver of just $38.00, his life reached its lowest point. Hall recalled the rich Greenlease family when he dreamed of one huge score that would set him up for life while he was incarcerated. You see, Hall had learned about the family's fortune years earlier when he had gone to a military reform academy with Bobby's older adoptive half-brother, Paul. Hall quickly came up with a scheme to pay the ransom. The only thing left to do was figure out how to kidnap the youngster. Bonnie entered the picture at that point. Bonnie was a contradictory person. She continued to engage in prostitution and extravagant parties, even though she was the recipient of a substantial bequest from her father. She also appeared to be attracted to crooks. Her first spouse was a bank robber who was shot and killed by the police. She ended up inheriting a house from the divorce settlement, though, because her second marriage didn't work out any better. Bonnie first met Hall in the bar of the Hotel Robideau in St. Joseph, Missouri. Their fortuitous encounter signaled the start of a sinister and perverse collaboration, which could have been the result of fate or simply the cosmos coming into harmony. Hall gradually told Bonnie about his perverse plan over the course of the months, and to his relief, she was all too willing to join in. Thus, like 2 ravenous wolves pursuing their prey, Hall and Bonnie started following the Greenlease family in the summer of 1953. In an attempt to identify a vulnerability to take advantage of, they observed the family going about their everyday activities. They initially intended to kidnap the Greenlease's daughter, Sue, but they quickly came to the conclusion that Bobby, their 6-year-old son, would be a simpler target. The stage was prepared for the kidnapping that rocked the country to its foundation, because they understood they had to move quickly if they wanted to score the big score. Pretending to be Bobby's aunt, Bonnie had taken him up from school without causing any trouble. After that, Hall was waiting at a pharmacy when Bonnie and Bobby were dropped off. Hall took charge and led them to an empty field in Overland Park, Kansas, across state borders. Bobby was left alone with Hall, who had no intention of keeping him alive, after Bonnie exited the car and went a short distance. Hall initially attempted to kill Bobby with a piece of rope, but the rope was too short. Hall struck Bobby in the face, knocking out one of his teeth out of frustration and rage. Hall took out his .38 caliber revolver and shot Bobby at close range when he slumped to the floor of the automobile. After being kidnapped, Bobby did not live for more than half an hour. Both Hall and Bonnie realized they needed to remove the evidence after committing the horrible act. They wrapped Bobby's lifeless body in a trash bag and traveled to Bonnie's house in St. Joseph, Missouri. Then, in order to hide the smell of the corpse, they gently buried the bag in a grave that had been prepared in the backyard. They covered the bag with a lot of lime. In an attempt to pass the grave off as a flower garden, Hall then covered it with chrysanthemums. Now, Hall and Boney quickly fled to St. Louis across the state as soon as they had the ransom money. Hall had bought 2 metal suitcases there to hide the cash. In addition, he and Boney discovered an apartment on Arsenal Street overlooking Tower Grove Park, where they reveled in their newfound wealth by drinking excessively. As the evening went on, Boney's intoxication finally overcame her, and she fell asleep. Hall had another plan, and this was the ideal time to implement it. He snuck out of the flat with the rest of the loot in the middle of the night, after placing $2,000, 0 cents, in Bonnie's purse. Hall then picked up a sex worker called Sandra O'Day on the taxi ride to the Coral Court Motel in Marlboro, Missouri. Before he was arrested, he intended to utilize Sandra's assistance to distract the police. Hall arranged for her to travel to Los Angeles so that he could mail the Greenlease family a letter he had written. By doing this, he would have diverted the police's attention. According to stories, Sandra was the one who reported the ransom money that Hall was carrying around to the police when she allegedly saw it. However, it's unclear if this is true or not. It is also thought that Hall purchased a shovel and 2 trash cans. In order to conceal the ransom money, he then rented a car and drove it to a location in St. Louis County along the Merrimack River. However, Hall kept the money with him since he was unable to locate a suitable place to bury the cans. Shortly after this, he was taken into custody. Police took immediate action after all of these revelations were made public. In the apartment where Hall had left her, Bonnie was found and taken into custody. They both faced the full weight of the law for their crimes after being charged with capital murder and kidnapping. Bobby's remains were found where they had been buried on October 7, 1953. Family members and neighbors came together to grieve the untimely death of this defenseless boy at a sad burial conducted at St. Agnes Catholic Church 2 days later, on October 9. As a victim of one of the most horrible murders in American history, Bobby was buried with sorrow and tears in his eyes. Since the crime had crossed state boundaries and was therefore a federal prosecution, punishment was swift for the 2 kidnappers. Hall and Bonnie entered a guilty plea to the accusations against them when they appeared in court on October 30, 1953. After only 1 hour and 8 minutes of deliberation, the jury recommended the death penalty. Hall and Bonnie accepted their fates on November 19, 1953, less than a month later, and neither attempted to challenge the decision. Just 81 days after the kidnapping, on December 18, 1953, they were both put to death in a Missouri gas chamber. Hall was 34 years old, and Bonnie was 41 when they passed away. There were several complexities in the aftermath of Bobby's kidnapping and death. The Greenlease family may have found closure with Hall and Bonnie's execution, but it also exposed a shocking truth. Now, just half of the ransom money was found when Hall was taken into custody. Unaccounted for was $312,000, 0 cents in total. The cops that arrested Hall, Patrolman Dolan, and Lieutenant Shoulders were suspected of stealing the missing funds. At first, though, they denied this, saying they had delivered all the cash to the police station. They ultimately faced federal charges and were found guilty of perjury. Shoulders received a sentence of 3 years in jail on April 15, 1954. Dolan, however, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. However, this was not the end of the story. Shoulders unexpectedly passed away in 1962. Shoulders and mob boss Joe Costello had actually stolen half of the ransom money, Dolan told the FBI after this. It wasn't until Shoulders and Costello were dead that Dolan finally told the truth. He had been too afraid to speak up earlier for fear of reprisals. In July 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson pardoned Dolan for his assistance. This was the conclusion of Bobby's tragic story. We are reminded when we consider the terrible events of 1953 that Bobby eventually received justice, albeit at a high price. We have to keep asking ourselves, how can we stop catastrophes like this from occurring again? What can we learn from Bobby's story, therefore? And how can we apply this understanding to create a society that is safer and more equitable for everyone? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Have you ever pondered how one choice, one accident, and all you knew and loved can suddenly turn life into a nightmare? I'll tell you about a day that began normally but ended in a way that nobody could have foreseen. Consider this. At 3 in the morning, the doorbell rings. You expect to see a neighbor or perhaps a courier who has the wrong address, but instead you see the man you believed was forever gone from your life. The air in the room is suddenly heavy, his hands are clenched into fists, and his eyes are filled with anger. What are you doing? Will you freeze, knowing that this is your final error? Or will you scream and flee? Alina Shiket's journey started when she came to the conclusion that love shouldn't be painful. She moved on from everything, but when he returned, everyone who knew her was shocked by what transpired. In 1997, Alina Shiket was born in Russia. When she was 7 years old, she and her family relocated to Pennsylvania in the United States. She was a lively and curious youngster from birth. She picked up English fast and developed an interest in science and the arts in school. She was regarded as a gifted and driven young woman who consistently pursued her objectives. Her responsiveness and friendliness were her defining traits. She frequently assisted her peers and took part in charitable activities. Alina enrolled in the University of Pittsburgh to study biology after graduating from high school. She was motivated to work hard and study because she wanted to become a doctor. Alina was well liked by her classmates and numerous friends, who characterized her as a cheerful individual who was always willing to offer guidance and support. She stood out from her friends because of her kindness and quest for fairness. Alina's pride and support came from her family, particularly from her parents, Ian and Ellie. She was the focal point of their lives as an only child. They had a close relationship and frequently spent time together, traveling and helping her with everything. The Shikets had never experienced such worry as they did in October 2017. 20-year-old Alina's parents, Ian and Ellie, had become used to her incessant texts and phone calls. Their kid was always in contact, particularly when they shared plans. However, the quiet that's surrounding their house on this particular day took on a new, ominous color. Even the morning before they were to be brought together for a significant occasion, the annual charity marathon in which they took part, Alina had just vanished from view. They were passionate about the breast cancer campaign, and Alina was constantly at the center of these gatherings. She had a genuine and profound compassion for people. She seemed to find power in helping others, as though she were attempting to shield her family from the dangers of the outside world. But she didn't arrive that morning. There were no missed calls or messages. Every minute seemed like an unending torment. Unable to control the mounting worry that was coursing through her body, Ellie was always scrolling through her phone. The automobile seemed to be moving at a snail's pace, and Jan, who was seated behind the wheel, tried to maintain composure, but his quivering hands and fixated gaze revealed his growing concern. They were on their way to Alina's apartment rental on the University of Pittsburgh campus. Long hours of waiting for something unthinkably awful grew out of what should have been a 30-minute drive. Without even looking back at her husband and their dog, who were silently staying in the car, Ellie hurried to the home. As though it were trying to escape, her heart thumped in her chest. She pressed the doorbell quickly, her hands shaking. The few seconds of waiting seemed to drag on forever. The house was so quiet that it seemed as though the walls were closing in on you. When Ellie and Jan arrived at their daughter's house, the usual warmth and noises of life were vanished, leaving behind the icy silence of unsolved problems. Even the air seemed to have become heavier, as if the whole world had frozen in expectation of something terrible. To make one final call to Alina, Ellie took out her phone once more. The lengthy rings rang in her heart, each one piercing it more deeply like shattered strands of hope. Nobody could have predicted that a seemingly normal morning would become the Shiket family's greatest nightmare. Ellie had been frantically attempting to contact her daughter just 30 minutes prior. She was now standing in front of Alina's locked door. The dull sound of her fists hitting the wood echoed throughout the house, but there was only quiet in answer. Her voice wavered and erupted into a cry as she called her daughter's name once more, but she received no answer at that very moment. Something inside her broke. Realizing that things had gotten out of hand, they panicked. Ellie called out for Jan. Fear gave him the strength to act, and he rushed into the house. He was aware that time was running out, an excruciating length of empty minutes every second. The sensation of approaching doom intensified with each blow to the door. The door finally gave way, opening with a jarring noise that allowed them to enter a scene they were neither ready for. Alina's neighbor, Zach, had been observing from the stairwell. All of a sudden, he felt alienated from this tragedy that was developing. The only reason he took the automatic step back was to protect himself from the horror that was suddenly leaking out of the still room. Ellie and Jan were met with a quiet that was no longer able to conceal what had transpired as soon as the door opened. Like a scene from a nightmare, the room was covered in dark stains. The walls and floor were marked by something unimaginable, as though the blackness had engulfed the light itself. At first glance, parents were unable to recognize their own daughter because of the horrifying sight of Alina's face. Ellie's voice broke the stillness and echoed through the home, causing the walls to vibrate as she yelled. Unable to comprehend the horror before him, Jan stood next to her, motionless. Nothing seemed to be able to return the world to normal at that point. It looked to have stopped. The dog added to the pandemonium that had taken over the house by barking hysterically when it sensed its owner's worry. It was as if an unbreakable darkness had engulfed the entire area. Jan eventually moved forward, but his legs were trembling as Ellie continued to scream. He was at a loss for what to do. The terror that had infiltrated their home left no one knowing how to handle it. When Zach heard the cries, he summoned up the bravery to go into the room. He hesitated to go through the doorway, knowing that what had transpired would permanently alter the course of this family's life. Alina lay on the floor in front of him. Her body was stretched out as though she had struggled for her life and defended herself until the end. As like something or someone had stolen not just her life but also her identity, half of her face was utterly deformed. With a start, Zach reached for his phone and dialed 911. His fingers were shaking as though the air had grown heavy and thick. The silence of the Saturday morning was soon broken by the sound of sirens. The fictitious quiet of the neighborhood was broken by the sound of sirens that were getting louder in the distance and filling the now empty streets. The paramedics, solemn and determined, hurried to the door as the ambulance screamed to a stop in front of the house. Every second felt hostile as their footsteps reverberated through the strange and chilly house. Ellie, who was still motionless at the entrance, welcomed the paramedics with a face that immediately made them realize that this woman would never be the same. She could hardly guide her trembling hands toward the room. As they passed the paramedics entering the darkened room, Jan, still mute and overcome, watched from the door. The gloomy scene is made even more intense by the draperies, which hardly let any light in. They dropped to their knees next to Elena's body. Everything moved swiftly, almost robotically, as they looked at each other and checked for a pulse. Time seemed to slow down for Jan and Ellie, even if it only took a few seconds. Their entire world fell apart as one of the paramedics shook his head. Ellie lost it, as though attempting to go back in time and bring her daughter back. She collapsed to her knees and let out a scream. Shock nearly paralyzed Jan. He did what he could. Even though he no longer felt like he had a firm foundation beneath him, he tried to keep his wife on the ground by embracing her. For a little while longer, the paramedics stayed in the room, getting ready to declare the death formally. However, that revelation felt like a sentence to Ellie and Jan, a blow from which they would never fully recover. Neighbors turned to watch as the roadway was illuminated by blue and red police lights. A group of people started to assemble, some of them muttering, some looking around anxiously, and some taking out their phones to take pictures. Alina Shiket's home was already surrounded by barriers and cop cars, and curious bystanders gazed at it, as if to protect the world from the terrible reality that awaited them inside the doors of that house. Officers with gloomy expressions were erecting barricades and gradually separating the crime scene from the rest of the city. The investigation was personally led by Police Chief Scott Schubert. He and a group of investigators carefully inspected the scene, taking pictures of me, a broken mirror, an overturned table, and every inch of the room. The haphazardly dispersed victims on the floor all indicated a frantic struggle. Alina died from multiple hits from a blunt object, the medical examiner's report stated. Every detail of this heinous act of aggression shouted rage, terror, and despair. It was not a calm crime of passion. Outside, rumors were circulating quickly. The throng was still expanding and the conversation was getting louder. While some had heard about her lover and others were aware of the tumultuous nature of their relationship, nobody could have foreseen how horribly it would end. A crime that would soon dominate conversations around the area had upended the customary tranquility of this suburban neighborhood. Matthew Darby, a young and talented basketball player and Alina's ex-boyfriend, was already a prime suspect in the police's eyes. Matthew's attractiveness with women was as well known as his performances on the collegiate court. He was always surrounded by prosperous, self-assured, and charming people, but beyond that polished facade, particularly with regard to Alina, were deeper, harmful impulses. Beginning at a Greensburg University, their friendship swiftly developed into a passionate romance, but jealousy and control gradually replaced the pleasure. After she moved to a different university, things began to shift. Alina made an effort to put her education first, make a fresh start, and break free from the toxic attachment. She ended the relationship, but Matthew was unable to cope. When Alina was gone from his life, his confidence collapsed, and his fury became overwhelming. On September 20, 2017, he began calling her non-stop and finally went too far. Hands shaking, Alina reported it to the police. Like a scene from a horror film, Matthew had climbed through a second-story window to break into her house. Even in her worst dreams, she couldn't have guessed that it was him. Yet she had heard someone scaling the drain pipe. With rage in his eyes, he stormed into her room and accused her of betraying him, ignoring his calls and leaving him. Roughly pushing her into the bed, his hands clamped down on her shoulders and squeezed her wrists until the bruises lasted for days. Feeling both relieved and afraid, she submitted the report, thinking she could finally stop him and that justice was on her side. She went to court with Jan and Ellie. Although the restraining order against Matthew seemed like a positive move, the courtroom tranquility was all too short. As the judge ordered his arrest, Jan and Ellie clutched her hands tightly. Alina's family believed that the horror that had plagued their daughter in recent months would come to an end when he was arrested for unlawful entry, but their dreams were quickly dashed. Alina was forced to confront her anxieties alone after Darby was released on $10,000 0 bail, a negligible amount in the legal system. Ellie and Jen were unaware that this would be the sign of impending doom. The house where they had sought solace became the scene of a tragedy a few days later. The oppressive feeling of dread that had pervaded the atmosphere for so long came to pass in the most terrible manner. Every action the detectives performed that day was tinged with the knowledge that crucial opportunities had been lost, and that Alina had not received the proper protection. Ellie had stopped crying as she stood behind the police tape. A mask of shock and disbelief froze her face. Jan held her hand as he stood by her. Alina's world never really left Matthew Darby. Every step she took was obscured by his shadow, which seemed to follow her. Zach, Alina's neighbor, subsequently acknowledged that he frequently witnessed Darby loitering outside her home. He felt like he belonged there. Zach recalled that he had been watching the catastrophe unfold without comprehending it, but he realized it too late. As if stalking Alina, he had witnessed Darby lurking in the shadows for hours on end, silently observing through the windows, never letting her leave his gaze. She blocked his number and changed passwords in an attempt to get away from him, but he always managed to get into her life. Once more, Matthew's jealousy was unquenchable, tearing apart anything that didn't comply with his demands like a ferocious animal. Zach once saw Darby yelling at Alina outside her windows in the middle of the night. There was mad jealousy and anger in his words. Every altercation seemed planned, and he became more vicious with each blow. Darby had taken over Alina's virtual world a month before to the catastrophe, hacking her accounts and removing likes she had given to other guys. The virtual world had to be exclusively his. Alina made an effort to establish limits with Virtue, but it wasn't enough, Matthew. Nobody was aware of what was going on behind closed doors on the evening of September 20. A weird sound, as if something had snapped, reached Zach's ears. He didn't give it much thought. In old houses, things break all the time. But then, there was a scream and a smashing bang. It was a terrified, despairing cry that broke through the night's silence. Zach was unsure of what to do. Hoping for a response, he posted a message to the house's group chat, but nothing came up. It felt as though time had stopped. Zach wouldn't find out until much later that Matthew Darby had already broken into the house and started attacking Alina while the neighbors were asleep. Alina's phone records, which had vanished from her residence following the crime, were being examined by police. The data showed that she had been frantically attempting to save herself by phoning for assistance, between 4:15 and 4:55 a.m. Alina's phone was traced to Route 76 close to the village of Irwin, and the most recent contact was placed from Darby's number. It was an unanswered last call for assistance. Police received a statement from a cab driver who became involved in this gruesome case. Around 4:21 a.m., he claimed to have driven Darby to Oakland's Seal Street and Ward Street crossroads. Darby begged him to wait for a few minutes, but that quickly increased to 10, and then 10 more. The driver started to feel nervous and he continued to experience fear. He eventually departed without his travel companion. Something was horribly off. The police kept reviewing the security footage in the meantime. They discovered video from a camera close to Alina's house that showed a man who looked like Matthew Darby strolling down the street while toting big black suitcases. Like a predator, he looked around warily, looking for a place to cover his tracks. The moment he came to a stop at a manhole cover was caught on camera. As though attempting to get rid of not only the evidence but also a piece of himself, his harshness and guilt, Darby carefully lowered the bags inside after lifting the lid. The case's main detective, Edward Fair, sent his team to the scene right away. There was no room for error on the part of the forensic investigator. After gently removing the manhole cover, they discovered a hammer and 2 knives within, all of which were smeared with dried blood. There were fragments of skin and hair on the hammer. Everyone working on the investigation was profoundly impacted by this revelation, which served as a silent testimonial to the ruthless and untamed aggression. The identification of the material would confirm the worst, and now everything depended on the forensic analysis. The system, which ought to have shielded Alina, failed her with every new fact. Only a trail of agony and misery remained after Matthew Darby had disappeared, as if vanishing into thin air. The police had enough proof to take action, even though they knew they wouldn't have much time to apprehend him. It was impossible to dispute the evidence gathered at the crime scene. Everything suggested Darby was the culprit, including surveillance footage, traces found at the scene, and the objects dumped in the manhole. An arrest warrant was issued right away, but Darby had already left Pennsylvania and vanished into the wide United States by the time the police began their thorough hunt. The search for Darby became a national manhunt. Although the search was conducted with unwavering resolve, the sense of urgency increased with every hour that went by. In the small South Carolina town of Myrtle Beach, Darby's luck finally ran out after a few days. A bystander alerted the police right away after spotting a suspicious individual trying to enter a property through a window. A man whose look matched the description given by witnesses was discovered by officers as soon as they got on the scene. Darby attempted to flee, his fear showing in every step, but the officers outran him. He provided false identification after being caught, which only made matters worse. His identification was verified by security footage and witness statements after his attempt to pose as a fugitive failed. Darby was charged with giving false information to the police, which added another charge in South Carolina and further compounded his case. He tried to persuade the judge of his innocence, but his request for bail was turned down. Fearing that he would try to escape again, the judge decided to keep him in detention and delayed his request for extradition so that he could speak with his lawyer. Another drama involving Alina's memory and the suffering of her loved ones was taking place in Pennsylvania while Darby was still being held. In Pittsburgh, Alina's friends and classmates organized a protest. To show support for her parents and to promote awareness, hundreds of people gathered outside the courthouse, knowledge of an issue that had been neglected for too long. Signs with the words, "Say no to domestic aggression," and "Love shouldn't kill," in strong letters, were held by people. Many participants donned purple shirts, which are symbolic of the fight against domestic abuse, and the words, "Our Russian Princess," which Alina's friends had given her, were printed on the back. This was a painful and unifying gesture that conveyed their rage at a system that had let their friend get hurt. Along with the demonstration, campaigners and Alina's family worked to have a new bill passed. Domestic abusers would be subject to electronic monitoring under Alina's law. In addition to paying tribute to their daughter, they did this in an effort to stop future tragedies of this kind. Already on the table for consideration, the bill became a symbol of hope that no one else would have to deal with such a harsh reality. Prosecutors were now providing more thorough evidence in the courtroom, all of which pointed to Darby's deliberate acts. Duquesne University security camera footage from the night before the crime was one of the most important pieces of evidence. It was evident from the video that Darby was trembling as he walked across campus and looked over his shoulder. According to a policeman on patrol that evening, Darby appeared anxious, probably even a little drunk. Using the excuse that he needed to charge his phone, he tried to enter the student union building. However, there was something concerning about his actions. The officer had a strong suspicion that Darby was hiding something, since he kept looking around as though he was frightened someone was following him. With each new piece of evidence and every videotaped moment, the court was getting closer to its inevitable conclusion. The name Matthew Darby had come to represent suffering, unfairness, and the pursuit of truth. The time a picture of him in a beer-lagered striped shirt on the campus elevator was revealed in court. His doom was all but certain. When he was arrested, the same clothing was discovered with him. There was not much space for doubt because of the prosecutors. Around 4 in the morning, Darby got a cab and left the university campus to go to Alina's neighborhood. The evidence left at the crime scene, the spooky traces of a fight, and the late-night break-in all made sense. The defenders, however, refused to give up. David Sri, Darby's attorney, attempted to refute every piece of evidence. He maintained that someone else might have called the cab using Darby's account, and that the security camera footage was insufficient to prove his identity. Is there any chance that this will result in an acquittal? Not likely. Soon after, Darby was apprehended while trying to break into a house near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. His use of phony identification simply served to bolster the evidence against him and further expose his flight. Darby decided to continue fighting in spite of everything. He went back to court with a new attorney, Joseph Haddock, a year after the conviction. Darby claimed that at his prior trial he had not been given adequate legal representation. According to Haddock, Darby was not completely aware of the trial's possible hazards and consequences. This was a new attempt to overturn the conviction on the grounds that Darby was not given a fair trial because of the lawyer's mistakes. In a prompt response to Darby's appeal, the Allegheny District Attorney's Office asserted that all of Darby's rights had been completely upheld. The concept of coordinating jurisdiction, which basically states that judges from one district shouldn't reverse the rulings of another without good reason, was debated. Nevertheless, the matter might still be reopened for a new hearing in the courtroom. The process might be slowed down but not completely stopped by this procedure. Despite the fact that his life sentence already appeared certain, Darby persisted in fighting for his freedom. His attorney put forth a lot of effort, gathering fresh information and looking for any way to overturn the verdict. Like a dying man clutching at straws, Darby clung to each attempt as if it were another lifeline. The problem is that this story isn't over yet, even though you're undoubtedly eager for the conclusion. Matthew Darby received a life sentence without the chance of release. Although it seemed that justice had been done, a new chapter had begun. He appealed, saying his last attorney had not done everything he could to protect him. Years after the initial sentence, Darby is currently battling for his freedom once more. Any chance to contest the case is being seized by his legal team. Despite her untimely death, Alina left behind more than just memories. She became a source of motivation for reforming a system that had for too long kept women at risk. Her friends and family have taken every possible action. Make sure it wasn't a pointless death. I would like to take a moment to speak to each and every one of you who is listening to this tale. How do we stop disasters like this from happening again? How can we ensure that Alina's parents' experience doesn't happen to any other family? We can't keep quiet. Thousands of women worldwide must deal with the realities of domestic violence. Every aspect of the issue needs to be addressed, from raising family awareness to taking legislative action. We must all realize that love should never be hurtful, and that caring should never become dominating. Together, let's help those who are in need. If we work together, we can make this world a safer place. And even though Alina is no longer with us, her influence endures because of the people she touched. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Sometimes it is hard to embrace the truth, so people make up a lie that they genuinely start to believe and persuade others of. Truth is something that exists in reality and corresponds to the actual state of circumstances. To celebrate the new year, 11 young men and 1 girl gathered in a hotel room. You'll think, strange collaboration, and you'll be correct. But hold on, one information will totally alter your perspective. Since all of the men at this party belong to a sexual minority, the 12 friends who got together to celebrate the year 2021 did so with great joy. In fact, they celebrated so well that on January 1st, the company had to take the only girl to the hospital, where doctors declared her dead. However, who was she? How did she pass away, and did anyone face charges related to her demise? However, everything is in order. You'll realize why we began this story with the idea of truth, as we dive into the previous party, practically minute by minute, and learn what transpired on that fatal night. Thus, John Paul de la Serna arrived at the 4-star City Garden Grand Hotel in Manila, the Philippine capital, around 11 a.m. on December 31, 2020. 9 additional men booked into rooms 2207 and 2209, which were on the same level, during the day, and Christine de Serra checked in later. Shortly after midnight, John Paul Kalili, the hotel manager, joined the merry company. The focus of New Year's Eve night was dancing, having a good time, and drinking a lot of alcohol. When Rommel Galida awoke at approximately 10 in the morning, she saw Christine dozing off in the bathtub. He wrapped a blanket around her and returned to his slumber. She was unconscious and starting to turn blue when he woke up a few hours later. 3 friends and hotel employees drove Christine to the hospital, but when they arrived at the emergency department, the physicians just declared her dead. The only girl was dead in the morning after spending the whole night in the hotel room with the 11 guys. News. The public was outraged by the crime's headlines. Since it was clear what a bunch of young men and 1 female could do all night, everyone had the same idea of what the story would be about. The investigation's task was to determine what actually transpired on that New Year's Eve night and the cause of Christine de Serra's death. Born on April 13, 1997, Christine Angelica de Serra was raised in Barangay San Isidro, General Santos City, into the prosperous household of John Nestor de la Serna and Sharon Rose Faba de la Serna. She developed into a bright, independent, and gregarious young woman. For her 3 siblings, Monica, Chloe, and JJ, Kristen was a devoted sister. She relocated to the bigger and more promising city of Davao, which is located on the shores of the bay of the same name. After completing high school, she enrolled in a university there. Christine was active on social media, danced, modeled, and studied hard. In addition, Christine was the pinnacle of knowledge and beauty. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, Arts with a major in Media Arts from the University of the Philippines, Mindanao, in Davao City in 2017 with honors. The girl has taken an active part in both acting and modeling. She faced off against 8 other contestants for the title of Ms. Silve Davao 2017 in the Davao City Mall run by the New City Commercial Corporation. In June 2018, she placed 2nd. From September 2017 until January, she took part in the yearly fashion show. She served as a marketing consultant for Gaisano shopping centers in Davao City, General Santos City, Tagum, Toro, and Digos in 2019. Christine has had a rich and satisfying life. Her life's ambition was realized in February 2019. She relocated to Manila in order to begin working for Philippine Airlines subsidiary, PAL Express, as a flight attendant. Desserts from Christine. December 28, 2020, was my last flight as a flight attendant. Since Christine's passing was widely reported, a lot of debates and theories were developed among the community. At first, authorities believed that Kristen was probably murdered and abused by a group of men she was hanging out with on New Year's Eve. Makati City Police charged 11 men with assault and murder in the early stages, despite the lack of autopsy results and a toxicology report. The case was deemed closed by the Philippine National Police. Suspects were identified and charges were brought against those arrested. Although 3 of the partygoers were arrested, after turning themselves into the police, the forensic medical report provided the primary explanation for Christine's death. On January 3, 2021, Forensic Medical Officer Police Major Michael Nick S. Sarmiento oversaw the autopsy of Christine's remains at the Rizal Funeral Home in Pasay City. After the body of Christine DeSera was examined, a forensic report was released, concluding that the ruptured aortic aneurysm was the cause of death. But it also noted a linear abrasion on the girl's right thigh, along with bruises on her right arm, right thigh, knees, ankles, and right foot. During the genital examination, deep-healed cuts and abrasions were also noted. A special investigation team was established to investigate the crime according to the National Capital Region Police Department. However, Christine's family refused to believe that a lively young girl could pass away too soon from natural causes. The family of Christine DeSera revealed at a news conference on January 5, 2021, that they had read the autopsy report indicating that she died from an aneurysm. They did, however, claim that the autopsy was not complete and asked for another one. The deceased's parents have been attempting to figure out how Christine's aorta was torn. After all, the aneurysm was caused by violence or abuse, according to the police and the DeSera Family Council, so it was not a natural death, and the offenders ought to face consequences. All 11 of the guys who spent the night with Christine were recognized by the prosecutor's office. She worked with some of them. Christine was meeting other young men for the first time. They were friends of her friends. As it happened, this party was started by Christine. She organized this party with her friends and had reserved the hotel room herself a few days beforehand. Although she was aware of her daughter's friendship with men, her mother Sharon never voiced any opposition. In their family, it was accepted as normal, since Kristen had always found it easier to interact and form friendships with men. It also became customary for her and her pals to meet up because they rarely took holidays at home. Kristen was able to call her family shortly after midnight each year to wish them a happy new year and to let them know about the event that was going on at the Makati Hotel. The family was able to observe Kristen's pals in the festive setting during the video conference. New rumors regarding the abuse claim have surfaced, though. The authorities were able to piece together the events of the case virtually minute by analyzing the hotel lobby footage, which served as the primary evidence of the occurrence. Note that Christine DeSera reserved room 2209, which was the designated location for the party. In the late afternoon, the major action starts to take place. Christine moves from room 2209 to room 2207 at 11:21 p.m. The company goes back to their accommodation around 11:38 p.m. At 2:50 a.m., Christine goes last and is seen holding her shoes in a glass. Christine enters room 2207 while holding Valentine's hand, a new acquaintance. A hotel worker brings an extra mattress to room 2209 at 2:52 a.m. while they are at a neighbor's house, and Valentine goes with Christine to her room. Valentine is clearly intoxicated based on her demeanor. She is carrying a bottle in her hand and has an overly easy walk. The couple enters around 3:15 a.m. after the companions pause at the door and Christine gives Valentine a short kiss before the man swiftly pulls away. 6 minutes after Christine had rushed out of her room and into her neighbor's room, one of the guys departs. He goes to 2209, presumably to give his pals a call at 3:22 a.m. In the next room on the right side of the corridor, Christine DeSera is seen talking to another man, while 2 more males pass by. She appeared distressed. After giving one of her friends a sudden embrace, Christine and her friend vanish completely from the camera's field of view. John Della Serna is seen escorting Christine back to the first room at 4:13 a.m. The camera catches Christine at the room's entrance once more, at 4:22 a.m. At 27:07, what brought her back there is unknown. After she nearly collapses, a man who resembles John Della Serna grabs her by the waist and brings her to room 2209. At 5:05 a.m., Christine appears to be somewhat inebriated. As Christine flees from a man who resembles Louis de Lima, the camera records her giggling. Later, they are outside of room 2207. At 6:23 a.m., Christine walks inside room 2209 with him and appears normal. For the final time, Christine appears on video alive. She is cognizant as Valentine carries her from room 2207 in his arms. Although the night was undoubtedly filled with events, the most significant reality is still hidden behind the scenes. The party went on until dawn, at around noon when Christine was discovered comatose in the bathtub. Her buddies continually tried cardiopulmonary resuscitation while carrying her to the ground. They tried unsuccessfully before calling the front desk for assistance. The head of security and the hotel management entered the room a few minutes later. Christine was lowered to the hotel's first floor using a wheelchair. Christine was escorted to the hospital by Romel Galita. Regretfully, the doctors simply mentioned the girl's passing. Romel delivered the dreadful news to Christine's mother over the phone. Despite the fact that it appears to be a fun party and that it is difficult to fit so many people in one room, the investigators suspected that the young people were using illegal substances to increase the effects of the alcohol as they frantically moved from room to room throughout the night. Some of the inmates stated, when questioned, that just whiskey and tequila were used during the party and that no other illegal substances were present. It is important to note that the investigation's initial focus was illegal drugs because, according to one of the detainees' testimony, Christine had concerns about the drink's composition and hypothesized that someone might have added an unidentified chemical to spike them. Guests were instructed to bring their own food and beverages, it turned out, though the post-mortem report indicated that neither alcohol nor illicit narcotics ingested the night before her death would produce this type of aortic dilatation or defect. There was conjecture that Christine's drink was poisoned and might have caused the aneurysm that ultimately resulted in her death. Since there were no illegal substances or evidence of them in the room or the suspect's personal items, the substance information was ultimately deemed unsubstantiated. The 2009 search for possible evidence in the two rooms and the adjacent room did not produce the expected results, which at least partially demonstrated Christine de Serna's brutal death. When questioned, Mark Rosales and John de la Serna declared that they would never harm Christine and openly acknowledged their unusual orientation. John further disclosed that early in the morning, Christine was already throwing up, so they had to take her back from room 2207. According to Romel Galita, he discovered Christine in their room's bathtub at around 10 in the morning. Assuming she was asleep, he just covered her with a blanket. However, he discovered the girl was blue and not breathing around midday after he woke up and went back to wake her. He hurried to his pals for support. She was taken to Makati Medical Center per the hotel's recommendation, where she was declared dead upon arrival, allegedly as a result of an aortic aneurysm rupture. The Makati City Police were notified of the death by the hospital. By that time, other men from a nearby hotel room had departed. In a separate statement to the public on January 4, the Philippine National Police stated that, despite some missing information and contradictory claims, the case involving Christine de Serra is nearly resolved. According to Police Chief Debold Sinas, 3 individuals have already been identified and taken into custody. The Makati City Prosecutor's Office ordered the release of the 3 males who are in detention on January 6 owing to a lack of evidence, even though other suspects were still being sought. The prosecution maintained that there was not enough evidence to prove Christine had been molested. They added that the police have not yet established that Christine de Serra's death was due to abuse, even if it occurred. In addition, Christine was an extra lady at the party, which was a get-together of males with unconventional sexual orientations who were all flirting with one another. Most of the people at the party, including Romel Galita, were Christine's co-workers and stewards, Sarah, at PL Airlines, demonstrating her familiarity with these individuals and their sexual orientation. The Makati City Prosecutor's Office opened a preliminary investigation on January 13, 2021, after an official autopsy verified that the 23-year-old's cause of death was a ruptured aortic aneurysm. Additionally, the prosecutor's office demanded that the police make public the findings of the victim's toxicological report, histopathic research, and DNA analysis. The claim that her daughter was not abused, however, was disputed by Christine's mother, Sharon de Serra. She stated during an appearance on a news program that a gang of men were abusing her daughter. If you're a mother and you see Christine's body, you'll likely understand the suffering she endured as a result of them. But my daughter is no longer able to speak because she is no longer alive. During the TV show, the woman voiced her opinion. As proof that the autopsy report was erroneous, Sharon pointed to the cuts and bruises on her daughter's body that were not included. Later, Christine's relatives stated that they wanted a second autopsy to refute the authorities' initial conclusion that she passed away naturally. The foundation was bruising and injuries that weren't noted in the initial report. Brick Reyes, a family representative, stated that there would be enough proof of Christine's torture from the wounds on her arms and legs, as well as from her remains. Additionally, according to Rick Reyes, they think the young lady was assaulted and drugged before to her passing. During the New Year's Eve celebration, Christine, who was already drunk, claimed that her drink appeared to have been tampered with. According to Christine's parents, they have lodged a complaint, calling for Michael Nix Armiento to be fired immediately for egregious carelessness and incapacity in creating Christine's death certificate and forensic report. Reporters were informed by Dr. Maurici Ramos, a friend of the Dosser family, that a second autopsy was performed on the deceased. He also underlined that the Death Investigation Unit has received the biological fluids retrieved from the second autopsy and will furnish further information following a final review and compilation of all the forensic team's results. The cause of death was consistent with a ruptured aortic aneurysm, according to the pathology post-mortem results from the Southern Police District Crime Lab Division's forensic report, which was then circulated on social media. According to the official autopsy, Christina was not mistreated the night before she passed away. The aorta was the real cause of Dicera's demise. The deficiency weakened as a result of the aorta's continuous rise in blood pressure, and ultimately, the aorta burst. There was blood loss at the moment of the aortic rupture, according to the Philippine National Police Crime Lab report. Christine thus had a number of symptoms, including nausea, weakness, and perspiration. Within a few hours, she died from the blood loss brought on by the aortic rupture. According to the report, this indicates that the girl had an aortic aneurysm that ruptured, causing the lower portion of the aorta, the primary vessel that delivers blood to the entire body, to grow. This conduit passes through the chest and belly after leaving the heart. The aorta is the largest conduit in the body, so if it bursts as it did in this instance, a person could lose a significant amount of blood and possibly pass away. The fact that Christine's aneurysm did not happen recently was also mentioned. It began many years ago. According to the article, dilatation existed long before she passed away and is a chronic illness. Even if she hadn't passed away that tragic night, she would have perished in any situation when her blood pressure would have increased to the point where the aneurysm ruptured. Christina Dicera's undetected hypertension was further confirmed by the autopsy, which also showed that her heart was larger than a healthy heart. Although it is generally accepted that the girl died of natural causes, the 11 young men who attended the party and genuinely attempted to provide Christine with first aid were shamed and persecuted as criminals as a result of the pervasive false information. Since then, all 11 of the men who were initially charged have been freed. In an attempt to correct the problem, the Makati City Prosecutor's Office stated that suitable proof could not be obtained at the time of the publicity and that the evidence offered was insufficient to prove that Christine Dicera had been abused. As a result, they had to construct a version based on indications of the victim's physical decline. 2 further suspects also claimed that they were coerced by the police into making up a story about the presence of illegal narcotics at the scene. Party on New Year's Eve. Another tale participant described how his kiss with Christine, which was caught on camera the night before she passed away, was captured. The man claimed that Christine was the one who started it, but he made an effort to push her away. When the flight attendant's body was discovered, law enforcement officials came under fire for failing to do a comprehensive toxicological analysis. The men's charges were ultimately withdrawn for lack of evidence, due to suspicious circumstances that appeared to contradict the Philippine National Police's findings. Christine Dicera's death garnered a lot of public attention. As further information emerged from Christine's family, who were unable to accept the reality and believe in their daughter's natural death, her story began to garner a lot of attention online. In an attempt to secure justice for her daughter Sharon, the girl's mother made a plea to President Rodrigo Duterte. "I'm just a regular person. You have a daughter as well. Since I don't want anyone to suffer from the same brutality and cruelty as my Christine, I want to speak out publicly." More than a week after Christine Dicera's passing, her friends and co-workers sent condolence messages, reposts, and farewells over social media. She was interred at Forest Lake Memorial Park, in her birthplace of General Santos. In the end, Christine Dicera's unusual situation is a perfect illustration of how the media may disseminate false information and how it can influence both the public and the individuals involved. The story's goal as it nears its conclusion is to return to the truth, which will eventually, in one form or another, assume its rightful place. Even though there is just one truth, Christine's family continues to believe that these individuals killed the girl and that there is a mystery behind this tale. For my part, I don't understand, and couldn't find any information regarding Christine's body wounds and bruises. Why was it kept quiet? Despite having cuts and bruises, it appears that Christine's death was caused by an aortic rupture, brought on by heart disease rather than by those injuries. As a result, they ignored her body's wounds. You guys are the judge. However, I think there are a lot of strange and inconsistent things in this case. I hope Christine's family comes to terms with the irreversible loss, because young men, guilty or not, will spend the rest of their life remembering the same depressing tale and coming up with justifications. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, two 19-year-old high school sweethearts, went missing on August 9, 1980, after attending a wedding celebration at Concord House in Concord, Wisconsin. Searchers discovered a pair of pants, Tim's car with his wallet inside, some ropes, and a pair of women's undergarments strewn over Concord over the course of the following few days. A gruesome finding resulted from these hints. Tim and Kelly's bodies were discovered brutally mutilated and allowed to decay in a field 2 months later. Nearly 30 years later, the culprit, a man so modest that even his neighbors were unaware he had such sinister secrets, was identified thanks to developments in DNA technology, an unusual witness, and an investigator's unwavering pursuit of the truth. But why did it take so long to locate this individual, and who was he? The story for today transports us back to Concord, Wisconsin, a tiny community of just over 2,000 people in Jefferson County. The peaceful town is a great place for those who enjoy the outdoors because it includes a lot of parks and natural areas. Locals frequently engage in outdoor pursuits like biking, hiking, fishing, and camping. At roughly 7%, Concord's violent crime rate is 1/3 of the national average of 22.7%. Concord was the kind of community where neighbors looked out for one another, and people never locked their doors in the 1980s when the major events of today's story took place. Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, both 19-year-old high school sweethearts, thought they could marry, settle down on a farm, raise their kids, and age together in this kind of setting. Tim Hack and Kelly Drew were high school sweethearts who were 19 years old and engaged in 1980. The couple originally met while attending Fort Atkinson High School, despite the fact that Kelly lived with her family in Fort Atkinson, which is also in Jefferson County, while Tim lived with his family in Hebron, a small village in Jefferson County. Kelly was a lovely, compassionate young lady who had a strong interest in cosmetics. Tim was a tough, industrious farm lad. Because of their gentle dispositions, their friends and family adored them both. As a pair, Tim and Kelly were viewed as role models for other young people. Tim began working as a farmer after high school, and his best buddy was a tractor known as the Lonesome Loser. Kelly, meantime, attended beauty school and recently graduated in 1980 with the goal of becoming a beautician and hairstylist. Tim and Kelly went to a wedding reception at Concord House in Wisconsin on August 9, 1980. After the reception, the couple was supposed to go to a carnival with some friends, but they never did. They departed the reception on August 9, 1980 at about 11 p.m., the last time anyone saw them alive, when they were still nowhere to be found or heard from on the morning of August 10, 1980. Tim's father, David Hack, reported them as missing. David discovered Tim's brown Oldsmobile in the Concord House parking lot that same day. Tim's jacket, checkbook, and wallet with $67.00 were all locked inside the car. About 3 miles from Concord House, Kelly's pants and underwear were discovered on the side of the road on August 15th, together with male bodily fluids. By the side of the road, they also discovered some ropes that had been tied by a person who seemed to have military experience. The case took a significant turn when these garments were found. Finding a couple who might have just decided to run off and have a romantic break was suddenly no longer the goal. Instead, it was to try to find them alive, since they were probably in danger. Approximately 2 months later, a group of squirrel hunters from Milwaukee were located approximately 7 miles from Concord House in the Ixonia, Wisconsin area. They discovered Kelly Drew's severely decomposed bones while strolling through a forested area along a railroad track that ran parallel to Highway 16 east of Watertown. She had no clothes on. They discovered a fully clothed male body around 100 yards distant, which they determined to be Tim Hack's. Both of them died by homicide, and the case, which is now officially a homicide, was known as the Sweetheart Murders. Because no murder weapon was discovered at the site, police were unable to determine the cause of death right away. Nevertheless, the medical examiner discovered ligature marks on Kelly and stab wounds on Tim's body, indicating that he died from strangling and stabbing. Kelly's wrists and ankles had ligature marks that were consistent with being bound. Damage and bug activity near Kelly's throat suggests that she was strangled. Additionally, the bodily fluids discovered on Kelly's clothing pointed to assault. Because the Sweetheart Murders had all the makings of a fantastic tale, it began to garner national attention. Police were unable to identify the perpetrator or killers of 2 adolescent sweethearts who seemed to have been killed in a mindless act of violence. In order to determine whether someone might have despised the couple enough to murder them, they started their inquiry by speaking with everyone who knew them. Everyone who attended the wedding celebration, including the Concord House employees who were on duty that evening, was also questioned by police. Edward Wayne Edwards, a handyman employed at the Concord House, was one of the employees that was questioned. According to Edward, who lived in a campsite next to the Concord House close to Interstate 94, he had not seen the pair and was not even at the Concord House when they vanished. He said he was shooting deer in the woods around here, but when the police questioned him about it, they discovered that he had a broken nose. He said he had acquired it while hunting deer. Given that it was August and Wisconsin's deer shooting season began in November, the detectives found it strange. In September 1980, Edward left Wisconsin with his wife and 5 children after being questioned by the police. Eyewitness reports of a filthy-looking van that had been parked close to Tim's car in the Concord House parking lot meantime provided investigators with the most promising lead. Around the time Tim and Kelly were last seen, witnesses said they saw the van abruptly and suspiciously drive away. That was the case with Edward's vehicle, where he frequently kept a .357 revolver. However, authorities had limited options for investigating that lead in the absence of a license plate number or compelling evidence linking him to the crime site. The investigation's remaining leads abruptly stopped. The case fell cold once the file was put away. One of the investigators in charge of the initial investigation, Richard Lewell of the Wisconsin Department of Justice, requested that the case be revisited in 2008, 20 years after Tim Hack and Kelly Drew were murdered. Lewell had been obsessed with the case for nearly 3 decades. He wanted to settle the case as soon as possible because he was getting near to retirement. In an interview, he stated, "As I was reaching my retirement age, DNA was making drastic leaps and bounds. The scientific and technological developments over the past few decades gave him the confidence to pursue the case at this time." His vigorous approach to the matter demonstrated his newly discovered confidence. Lewell suspected that the killer's name would be on file because the police had previously interviewed him during the early phases of the investigation. He simply needed to locate it. Lewell searched through the paperwork, witness accounts, and interview tapes for 2 months before identifying Edward Wayne Edwards. In addition to having the resources and opportunity to conduct the murders, Edwards' decision to relocate his whole family out of Wisconsin soon after being examined by the police prompted suspicions. Lewell's suspicion that Edward was the murderer led him to enlist the help of a group of cold case investigators. They discovered that Edward had been a very challenging person to live with when they spoke with his neighbors during his time in Concord, Wisconsin. He was a restless, short-tempered man who frequently thrashed his wife and kids without warning. He was essentially a monster, they said. In 2008, his 37-year-old son, John Edwards, said of him, "I don't think he knew how to control his emotions. There was some type of rage there." Edwards' daughter, Belicio Edwards, called the police in April 2009 with alarming information. She claimed to have knowledge of certain details regarding the cold case murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew that she thought would aid police in wrapping up the case. Her father, Edward Wayne Edwards, a former Marine with a lengthy criminal past, was one of the men she was closest to. Yet this knowledge implicated him. April was an inquisitive youngster growing up, and the most intriguing mystery to her was her father's peculiar existence. She had always wondered about her father's lifestyle and the reasons behind the family's frequent moves. She recalled that they had moved from Concord, Wisconsin, around the time of the unsolved killings of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, and she saw the news report about them one day when she was an adult. Finally, the pieces were coming together, and she had a gut feeling she needed to call the police. 1933 saw the birth of Edward Wayne Edwards in Akron, Ohio. He had to live in a nun-run orphanage after losing his parents when he was a small child. After experiencing emotional and physical abuse throughout his stay at the orphanage, Edwards became a restless and disobedient adolescent. By the age of 17, he was incarcerated at a juvenile detention facility after multiple run-ins with the law for minor offenses including shoplifting and breaking and entering. Edward was released from juvenile incarceration in 1951 at the age of 18, provided that he enlisted in the United States Marines. However, Edward vanished and had to be dishonorably discharged from the Marines after only a few months of service. He wasn't prepared to abandon the life of crime, and Edward was soon imprisoned for robbery once more. At the age of 22, he broke out of Akron's jail in 1955 and proceeded to loot petrol stations around several states. For the remainder of his 20s and 30s, Edward would live as a fugitive, traveling the nation and performing odd jobs as a handyman, ship docker, and vacuum cleaner vendor. It is clear from his autobiography that Edward relished his fame at this time. He claims that because he wanted to be renowned, he never attempted to hide his name or use a pseudonym while conducting his crimes. Edward was incarcerated again in 1960 at the age of 27, this time for trying to pose as a federal officer. But after he broke out of the jail where he was being held in Portland, Oregon, the FBI listed him on its 10 most wanted list in 1961. Edward was apprehended by the authorities in 1962 and sent in the United States Penitentiary Leavenworth. Nevertheless, he was released on parole in 1967 due to his good behavior. In his autobiography, he credited a kind guard at Leavenworth with helping him grow. Following his release from prison, Edward married and started giving motivational speeches. At the age of 39, Edward made appearances on 2 television programs, To Tell the Truth and What's My Line. In 1972, he also released his autobiography, The Metamorphosis of a Criminal, the true life story of Ed Edwards, and discussed his life as a master criminal on a number of talk shows and game shows. Edwards was listed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list in the late 1000s, 960s. He was one of the suspects in 2 murders that occurred in Portland, Oregon. Although they were unable to provide proof, it was evident from looking up Edward Lane Edwards' criminal history that he had served time in jail and had been found guilty of a number of offenses, including fraud, arson, robbery, and car theft. He had accomplished a great deal. For Edward, everything appeared to be coming together at last. The system had been beaten by him. He was headed toward success. Sadly, Edward's good fortune was short-lived. He killed his first victim in 1977. Billy Loveco, age 21, and his girlfriend Judith Straub, age 18, who lived in Sterling, Ohio, were his victims. On August 7, 1977, Billy and Judith went on a date, but they never came back. Judith's shoes and pocketbook were still in her car when it was discovered later that day in Silver Creek Metro Park's parking lot. On August 8, Norton police searched for Billy and Judith with the help of family members and a National Guard helicopter. Their bodies were discovered by the search team in the dense weeds close to Metro Park. A 20-gauge shotgun had been fired at them directly. Edward got away with the killings because police at the time were unable to link him to the case of Billy and Judith. Additionally, these killings set a pattern that would be followed by Tim and Kelly's murders. At the age of 49, Edward was incarcerated again for arson in Pennsylvania in 1982. In 1993, however, he sent a letter to the FBI asking for his criminal history records for cities in 19 states, demonstrating his continued pride in his criminal achievements. The data were purportedly for a new book he was writing about criminals like Jimmy Hoffa, Charles Manson, and Tony Provenzano that he had met while incarcerated. Edward killed his 3rd person in 1996 when he was 63 years old. His victim was Danny Boy Edwards, a 25-year-old foster son who spent 7 years living with him in Burton, Ohio, before he was brutally murdered. Danny Boy served in the U.S. military, Army. In some way, Edwards persuaded him to leave the service and go home. Edward killed him with 2 gunshots to the face after tricking him into going into the neighboring woods when he arrived home. Danny Boy's body was left in a shallow grave by Edward. Eventually, a hunter discovered it there and informed the police. However, Edward also got away with killing Danny, just like he did with his first round of killings. In addition to the well-known Zodiac deaths, Edward may have been responsible for 15 more murders. John Cameron, a retired homicide investigator, also thought Edward was behind the Zodiac murders and other well-known unresolved cases. These statements, however, are regarded as conspiracy theories because they have not yet been validated. At the age of 77, Edward Edwards died on April 7, 2011, at the Corrections Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. He died naturally, which was a rather kind conclusion to a heinous crime spree that left 5 people dead and many grieving. On August 31, 2011, Edward was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection, but he fled. Even though Edward was apprehended and subsequently convicted guilty of killing Tim and Kelly, their relatives have not exactly been comforted by this development. Norma Walker, Kelly's mother, stated, "Instead of getting closure, Edward's arrest ripped open old wounds. You hope this day would come, but now that it's here, it's really hard. Everything starts all over again. All the memories come back. He robbed me of my daughter. Robbed me of my Christmases, birthdays, weddings, everything families do together." Tim's family was satisfied knowing that their son and his girlfriend's killer had been apprehended. David, Tim's father, expressed gratitude for the DNA evidence that proved Edward was the murderer and stated he was simply relieved it was ended. Through her podcast, The Clearing, Edward's daughter April Belicio, whose tip led to the cold case's conclusion, now dedicates her time to assisting the families of victims with unresolved cases in finding closure. She looks into unsolved homicide cases and works to have them reopened by the police. Edward Edwards, the murderer of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, brutally ripped away their promising future. The serial killer Edward had no personal grudges against the pair. It is all the more terrible since they simply happened to be in the wrong location at the wrong time. Some people think Edward evaded justice by passing away from natural causes a few weeks before his scheduled execution, despite the fact that he was eventually captured and given a death sentence for his crime. What are your thoughts about that? Did Edward receive his just deserts? Were his victims given justice? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. At exactly 11:23 a.m. on the morning of August 15, 1975, the Marple Police Department received a phone call. David Zanstra, a clergyman and the director of a summer Bible camp, was the caller. Gretchen Harrington, an 8-year-old girl, had vanished, according to his terrifying account. The camp was less than half a mile away from Gretchen's house in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and she had planned to walk there. But she never did. They immediately launched a desperate search for Gretchen, but to no avail. Gretchen's skeletal bones were discovered in neighboring Ridley Creek State Park on October 14, 1975, 2 months later. The community was left confused and uneasy as the crime went unsolved, in spite of this startling discovery. After Gretchen left for the summer Bible camp, what happened to her? Would the truth regarding Gretchen's death and abduction ever be revealed? Marple Township, which is in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, in the United States, is the setting for today's case. It was home to more than 23,000 people as of 2015. The Broomall Fields and Marple Gardens are 2 of the many fascinating attractions in Marple Township. With a crime rate below the national average, Marple Township is a rather safe area to live. It is among the safest communities in Pennsylvania, with a crime score of 0.17. The story of Gretchen Harrington started here. Harold Boyd Harrington and Ina Harrington welcomed Gretchen Eleanor Harrington into the world on June 13, 1967. Harold, her father, was a Presbyterian church preacher at the time. Gretchen had 2 older sisters, Zoe and Harriet, in addition to her parents. According to Gretchen's family, she was a sweet, gentle girl who exuded kindness. Gretchen was in the 2nd grade at Delaware County Christian School in Newtown Square by 1975, when she was 8 years old. Before a terrible incident upended Gretchen and her family's lives, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Gretchen left home early on August 15, 1975, to go to a summer Bible camp program. There were 2 places in this camp. A guy by the name of David Zanstra was the pastor of Trinity Church Chapel Christian Reformed Church, which was the first. Harold, Gretchen's father, served as the pastor of the Reformed Presbyterian Church, which served as the second venue. The first church hosted the Bible camp programs in the morning, and David would then drive the kids to the second church. The Zanstra and Harrington families knew one another quite well. Both moms fulfilled the customary role of a pastor's wife, and both fathers served as pastors. They lived close to one another. In actuality, Gretchen's dearest friend was one of Zanstra's daughters. That day, Gretchen's voyage was unique. She usually walked with her 2 sisters, 11-year-old Harriet and 12-year-old Zoe, to the summer Bible camp program. They did it every day. But on that specific day, their mother, Ina, was taking their infant home after giving birth to a baby named Jessica. Harriet and Zoe decided to wait for them to return. In spite of this shift in schedule, Gretchen's father, Harold, urged her to continue attending the summer Bible camp program in order to keep up her flawless attendance record. Thus, when her father said goodbye, Gretchen started the walk by herself. She started walking up the hill toward Trinity just after 9 in the morning. Harold watched her closely as she continued along Lawrence Road. He had no idea that after she was out of his line of sight, he would never again see his daughter alive. On warm summer days in the 1970s, it was rather common to observe kids strolling by themselves in a quiet suburban area like Marple. People didn't even consider the possibility of danger. Children used to play freely into the late hours of the night. Without any concerns, they wandered the streets, went into the woods, and even took a dip in Darby Creek, which ran behind Gretchen's house, to cool off. Without the use of cell phones or GPS watches to stay in touch with their parents, kids would walk blocks to their friends' homes. Simply put, Marple was a very safe place. Many longtime Philadelphians opted to relocate there for that very reason. Gretchen was expected to appear at Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church by 9:30 a.m. in the 1960s, but she failed to show up on time. Harold's realization of her disappearance was the first clue that anything was wrong. At approximately 11 in the morning, Gretchen's pals arrived at the house's front door in search of her. Harold acted right away, since he was worried and couldn't see Gretchen in the classrooms or in the area. To find out where his daughter was, he called the Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church and talked to David's wife, Maggie Zanstra. He was informed that she hadn't been spotted, though. After this, David called the Marple Township Police Department and officially reported Gretchen missing. Ruma and Marple Township were rocked by Gretchen's disappearance. Around the next day, August 16, 1975, hundreds of individuals were involved in a massive hunt for her. This comprised volunteer firemen and dog teams that searched farms, wooded areas, and both sides of the creek. From above, a Pennsylvania State Police helicopter kept scanning the area, but with so little information available, the authorities were forced to end the extensive search on August 17, 1975, just 2 days after Gretchen vanished. Daniel Hennessy, the police chief, openly acknowledged to a local newspaper that they had no idea where she was. The entire town went into a frenzy as a result of this circumstance, completely upending the sense of security in the area. In response, family members and friends began handing out flyers to local drivers. Gretchen's most current school photo, which showed her with a missing tooth and a happy childlike smile, was used on these flyers. Due to the lack of information, there were many unsolved questions and a rise in conjecture. Did she flee? Did she drown in the creek by accident? Was it someone she knew, or could it have been a stranger? The mystery of Gretchen's disappearance left everyone puzzled and extremely worried. The police spent the days that followed Gretchen's disappearance gathering information and trying to piece together what had happened. On August 19, they conducted one of their most important interviews with David. In the course of this discussion, David revealed that on the day Gretchen vanished, he had in fact driven a group of kids to the church. He claimed, nevertheless, that he had not seen her that day. Gretchen's sisters, Harriet and Zoe Harrington returned to Delaware County Christian School as August gave way to September. However, because they were confused of what to say, their fellow students found it difficult to approach them or have a conversation. When standard investigative techniques failed to produce any results in the face of such a heartbreaking circumstance, the police chose to take an unusual approach to find Gretchen. They sought the help of Judith Richardson Hames, a psychic. Judith was well known for helping law enforcement solve almost 100 criminal cases, especially those involving missing children, by using her psychic powers. Judith sat down with police officials in September 1975 and made a forecast that she hoped would turn out to be wrong. She thought Gretchen was dead, based on her psychic revelations. On October 14, 1975, 1 month later, a jogger in Ridley Creek State Park discovered a decomposing body concealed in the trees. When he saw a human fingernail, his initial confusion about what he had discovered was eliminated. As soon as the jogger realized how serious the situation was, he called the police. After examining the unique clothing found with the bones, Gretchen's parents were able to verify that it belonged to her. The medical examiner then used dental data to connect Gretchen's body to the body. Tragically, it was determined that Gretchen had been murdered. According to the forensic analysis, she had been severely beaten because her skull had many fractures. Despite the police's initial suspicions of mistreatment, the autopsy produced no hard proof to back up this theory. Harold, Gretchen's father, stood in the pulpit and gave a moving speech on Sunday, October 19, 1975, a few days after her body was found. He mentioned Gretchen's trust in Christ in his heartbreaking speech. He emphasized that although her murderer was no longer bound by their horrible deeds, she was now free from this world. David presided over Gretchen's funeral, which was a solemn occasion. Gretchen was 8 years old. She was buried in Johannesburg, Michigan, USA's Meridian Line Cemetery after the ceremony. Meanwhile, new enthusiasm for the investigation was sparked by the finding of Gretchen's body in the woods. Witnesses came forward to describe different people they had seen in the area where Gretchen's body was discovered. Men who had visited the area were described in these eyewitness accounts. As a result, the police were inundated with community suggestions, some of which seemed more promising than others, and others of which proved irrelevant or useless for pursuing justice. Investigators investigated a variety of possible possibilities, including closely examining local residents with past criminal histories. The evidence box at the Marple Township Police Department offices started to collect dust after they failed to produce any noteworthy leads. Reel-to-reel tape interviews, photographs, and memoranda were among the many items in this box that were pertinent to the case, but it was left dormant due to the lack of progress. The investigation into Gretchen's abduction became chilly over time. Sometimes a detective might review the case at roll call meetings or in their own time during a routine week. Every time, it felt pointless to search through the file in the hopes of finding something they had previously overlooked. They were frustrated and unable to make any progress on the case because the leads consistently ended in dead ends. The first detectives who had been investigating Gretchen's disappearance had either retired or died, so there were no updates on the case for many years. However, things took a dramatic change in the fall of 2022. A woman, whose identity was kept secret, contacted the Marple Police Department and said she wanted to talk about Gretchen's murder and disappearance. Sergeant Nick Coffin was in charge of Gretchen's cold case at the time. Consequently, this woman's message was sent to Coffin's phone when she called the Marple police. Coffin was told by the woman that she thought she knew who might have caused Gretchen's terrible demise. Suspicions of a potential connection were raised when she also brought up an attempted kidnapping episode that had happened around the same time. The long-standing mystery surrounding Gretchen's disappearance and death was given new life by this unexpected contact. State troopers scheduled an interview with the woman, who was designated as a confidential informant and only known by her initials, SF, on January 2, 2023. This interview would turn out to be a significant turning point in a cold case that had been unsolved for almost 50 years. SF claims that Gretchen and one of her sisters, Zoe, had gone to school with her. Investigators were also informed by SF that she had been friends with David Zanstra's daughters and had often visited the Zanstra home, often spending the night there. When she was 10 years old, SF recalled waking up in the middle of the night to see David touching her inappropriately during one of these sleepovers. Terrified by this unsettling conduct, she moved and caused David to rush out of the room, This unwanted touching happened again the next night, which is shocking. When the girls woke up in the morning, SF made the decision to tell David's daughter about her father's disturbing behavior. To her surprise, the daughter said something like, "He does that sometimes." Eventually, SF found the strength to tell her parents about this upsetting event. The Zandstrom family responded to the problem by moving to Plano, Texas, a Dallas suburb, shortly after Gretchen vanished. In the course of her interrogation, SF also provided state police with details of a girl named Holly, a neighboring child whom she saw as a friend. She said there had been an attempt to kidnap Holly. As the discussion progressed, SF showed the investigators a childhood journal she had kept. She had mentioned that a man had attempted to kidnap Holly twice in a particular diary entry, dated September 15, 1975. She continued to write in the diary that she suspected this man, whom she called Mr. Z, of being the one who had abducted Gretchen. David was what she referred to as Mr. Z. The investigation into Gretchen's murder and disappearance gained a crucial new dimension as a result of SF's revelation. Investigators were inspired to find 83-year-old David, who was now living in Marietta, Georgia, northwest of Atlanta, by SF's interview and her diary entries. David was interviewed by investigators at the Cobb County Police Headquarters in Marietta on July 17, 2023. Andrew Martin and Eugene Trey, two Pennsylvania troopers, conducted this interview. The tone of the conversation was rather amicable at first. At first, David denied ever seeing Gretchen on the day she vanished, but when the police told David about the assault claims made by a lady who had written about her experiences in the diary, things took a different turn. As the discussion went on, David finally lost it and admitted to something really unsettling. David told the police that he had seen Gretchen that morning as she was making her way to the church. According to him, she accepted his offer of a trip in his green AMC Rambler station wagon because she had no reason to refuse. However, David told detectives that he took Gretchen to a nearby wooded area instead of taking her to church as he had promised. He parked the car there and told Gretchen to take off her clothes, but she refused. He then punched Gretchen with his fist, causing her to bleed and sustain brain injuries. David then acknowledged that he attempted to hide Gretchen's half-bare body with sticks after learning she was dead before he left the scene. Detectives were in a state of shock as they processed the horrific contents of David's confession. Following this startling disclosure, David was taken into custody and charged with a number of grave offenses, including first-degree murder and criminal homicide, because of his confession about Gretchen. At last, 83-year-old David Zandstrom is in prison. Gretchen Harrington was kidnapped and brutally murdered by him in 1975, according to the prosecution, while she was walking to the Bible camp where he served as a pastor. In any case, David's admission brought some closure to Gretchen's destiny. It also brought up an unsettling query with far-reaching consequences. Could there be more victims for this man who has publicly confessed to killing one girl and hurting others? David had spent a number of years as a pastor at a now-closed church in Flanders, New Jersey, before moving to Marple. He had been a vocal opponent of sexuality education in the local school district's curriculum while he was a student at Trinity. He relocated his family to a church in Plano, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas, little than a year after Gretchen's remains were found. He served as the congregation's leader for 7 years. David then proceeded to the Living Faith Community Church in San Diego as part of his pastoral journey. In 2005, at the age of 65, he retired from his last pastoral position in Fairfield, California. Authorities knew that this extended tenure of leadership gave him significant access to and influence over young and vulnerable people. They were thus left wondering how much he might have done during these years. Although the Marple community had finally gotten some of the answers it had been looking for decades, many locals were not at all at ease with the unexpected turn of events. It had been far more reassuring to think that this horrible thing had been done by an outsider, a troubled criminal, someone who had come into town at random, kidnapped a little girl, and then disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. However, the offender was a well-respected member of their own community rather than an outsider. It was a devout figure, a husband and father to his own young daughters. The community's sense of security was further destroyed by this. Following all of this, Gretchen's family released a statement. They conveyed their appreciation to law enforcement for their continued commitment to the matter. Additionally, they expressed their desire that the person who killed Gretchen would be held accountable. David's legal team first opposed an extradition procedure after his arrest, but prosecutors, under the leadership of Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolsteiner, asked Governor Josh Shapiro's office for help in getting the confessed criminal back to Pennsylvania. David is currently being looked into for any abuse cases. In addition to this case, investigators also collected a DNA sample from David, which may be useful in a wider context, supporting the investigation of other missing individuals as well as assault and murder cases across the country. One cannot help but consider the intricacies and turns that have transpired over the years as we draw to a close this horrific case. What obstacles must Gretchen's family overcome in order to find healing and closure after all these years? What about the criminal, David? How should he be held accountable for his acts, in your opinion? And what effect would his arrest have on other possible abuse cases? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.